Good evening, and welcome to the August 18th edition of the Zoning Board of Adjustment. Before we get started today, I do want to just make a few announcements. So we have 3 items that have been postponed, 1 to next week and 2 to September, and 1 that has been withdrawn. I just want to let people know what those are in case you're here for them. The first one is Old Business A for 315 Banfield Road that will be heard in September. Also under old business, the request of Madison Commercial Group, 72 Marona Road, that has been withdrawn. And then under new business, the application for the Road to the West LLC for 140 West Road will be heard next week, August 25th. And lastly, the application for 64 Woodworth Avenue has also been postponed to September. So if anybody is here for those applications, those items will not be heard tonight. And just another housekeeping matter, the last application that we'll be hearing tonight is 0 Bartlett Street. There's been some confusion perhaps about where that actual billboard is. It is on Route 1 at the intersection of Lafayette and Bartlett. It is not the one that is further into town near Papa Wheelie's Bike Shop. So I just want to make everybody aware, and since that is going to be the last application we're going to hear tonight, okay? So with that, we'll start with the meeting. The first item of business is the approval of the July 21st, 2026 meeting minutes. Do we have a motion?
Madam Chair, I move that we approve the July 21st, 2026 minutes with the whole 1 case that we heard in that meeting.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Okay, are there any changes to the meeting minutes? Okay, seeing none, the motion is to approve the July 21st, 2026 meeting minutes. All in favor?
Aye.
Abstain.
And 1 abstention. Okay, so that passes. So now we will move on to tonight's applications. I do want to state before we start our applications, the applicant will be given 15 minutes to present their application to the board. They can ask for another 5 minutes to do their application. If they could please ask for that time prior to starting, we would appreciate it. And then we will open it up for public comment, people to speak to, for, or against. We're asking people to please limit their comments to 5 minutes. And with that, we will start. Okay. So the first item of business is Roman numeral 2, old business. The request of Jonah Goldblatt and Gabrielle Delaquilo, owners, for property located at 292 Wybird Street, whereas relief is needed to demolish the existing detached garage and construct a new 2-story attached garage addition and enlarged rear deck, which requires the following: variance from section 10.521 to allow a building coverage of 31% where 25% is the maximum. B, allow a left side yard setback of 4.5 feet where 10 feet is required. And C, allow a right side yard setback of 2.5 feet where 10 feet is required. Said property is located on Assessor Map 149, Lot 25, and lies within the General Residence A District. And who is here to speak to this application?
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the board. Colby Gamester here tonight on behalf of Jonah and Gabrielle Goldblatt and for 292 Wybird Street. And in person with me are the owners, Jonah and Gabby right there. Sean Peters, their builder of Alden Builders, and Eric Weinreb of Altus Engineering is on Zoom. And we'll just jump right into things. Steph, could you put the existing conditions plan?
Yeah, so sorry, I'm having a bit of technical difficulty here.
Or
Rob,
just keep
can
on
I
going?
get an extra mouse, please? So sorry. Having mouse troubles.
And that the mouse is not working.
Yeah,
That's okay, no pressure stuff.
just not much I can do, sorry. Thank you, sorry. All right. Sorry, Beth.
It actually only took 40 seconds. Seemed like a lifetime to Steph.
Thank you, Steph. So 292 Wybird Street is in the General Residence A District. Property is approximately 7,331 square feet, contains a 2.5-story wood-framed dwelling structure that has been most recently used as a 2-dwelling structure since the 1970s. And it also has an existing detached garage and various decks and porches. It has 48.89 feet of frontage solely on Wybird Street. The property has many existing nonconformities, lot area being one of them, frontage being one of them, and as well as a front yard setback of approximately 3.4, where 15 feet is required, a left side yard setback, of 2.13 feet, where 10 are required, and a right side yard setback of 0 feet, where 10 is also required. The building coverage is approximately 25.1% currently, where 25% is the maximum allowed. This pre-existing non-conforming lot of record, the lot and structures predate the city's first enactment of zoning regulations. The size and placement of the home, which if we're looking at it, you can see it's off to the right. It's actually built a little askew to the property lines, and there's a bay window, as you can see, that juts out into the drive path of the driveway, as well as the detached garage. All of these conditions in the lot itself are what create all of these existing nonconformities. The proposal, Steph, could you go 3 or 4? We can take a spin through the pictures too. You get used to it. There it is, right there. Thank you, Steph. So Jonah and Gabby proposed to do a lot of things to the property, some of which are underway right now, but otherwise did not need relief. They want to demolish the existing garage as well as the exterior stairs on the right. They want to shorten the driveway to reduce pavement and impervious surface. They want to construct a new 2-car garage integrated with a mudroom infill to the main house. They want to enlarge the rear deck as part of their open concept renovation of the first floor. And they're also, they're converting the 2-family into a single-family structure, and they're also installing stormwater improvements, including a dry well at the rear of the backyard. The new garage is architecturally consistent with the main house. It's modest in height, approximately 16.5 feet. It uses a stacked tandem configuration that works with the narrow lot and the geometry of the driveway and that bay window. And the result is that the building coverage does increase to 30.7%. And the left and right yard setbacks, though they are in the setbacks, they're actually more conforming than the existing conditions today. So as the chair read into the record, we're seeking 3 variances tonight. Building coverage of 30.7 feet, where 25 is the maximum. Left side yard setback of approximately 4.4 feet, where 2.13 currently exists and 10 feet is required. And a right side yard setback of 2.8 feet, where currently there's 0 feet and 10 feet are required. While the coverage is increasing by roughly 5.5%, the compact bundle design of this garage and the other improvements to the house are actually increasing overall usable space and open space, and it's also increasing the pervious area of the lot. So this is much better than compared to the status quo right now. The proposed setbacks, again, we do have encumbrances into the setbacks, but they remain within the existing non-conforming building envelope that the structures currently create on the lot. Jumping right into the variance criteria, granted, the variances will not be contrary to the public interest and will observe the spirit of the ordinance. The relief will not alter the essential character of the neighborhood or threaten the public health, safety, or welfare. The property already has a large garage. Many Wybird Street properties have garages and accessory structures within the setbacks due to the way, the age and the development of the neighborhood. Replacing a dilapidated detached garage with a new integrated, architecturally consistent garage continues and improves a feature that this property already enjoys and that is already part of this neighborhood's character. Removing the deteriorating garage and the exterior stairs and then snugging the new garage into the house enhances the streetscape. The purposes of coverage and setbacks, as we know, is prevent overcrowding, protecting light, air, privacy, maintaining the character, ensuring open space and whatnot. We find that these are all furthered by this project. The garage is non-living space, so it doesn't create this, this overlook or loss of privacy to the immediate butter to the left as you're looking at the property. Rather, it creates a nice buffer to the living space of the home. On coverage, yes, again, the percentages rises from 25.1 to 30.7, but this bundled design and reduced pavement increase usable open space and the pervious area. So we find that to be a much better trade-off than the sprawling detached garage and design this property currently exhibits. And a new garage would have to be built farther back that would consume more yard and add more pavement. The project also improves drainage with a dry well and other water mitigation features. Excuse me. Substantial justice. Any loss to the individual, which is not outweighed by a gain to the public, is an injustice. Here we find that there is a big injustice if denied this evening. And we look at it as if denial forces the owners into one of three potential outcomes. One, they could retain or try to repair the structurally compromised garage that creates a pinch point limiting the backyard. They could eliminate indoor parking and storage and security, increasing on-street parking demand. Or they could build a sprawling detached garage farther back and into the backyard. So a traditional side-by-side or double-car garage here would need to sit significantly farther back into the yard because of many factors, one of them being that bay windows constraint on the driveway, as well as, and then there'd be requiring more pavement, it would consume more open space, and it would recreate the multi-structure sprawl that the infill design is trying to avoid. The integrated design is one that delivers reasonable two-car parking while increasing open space and preserving privacy. So we find that denial imposes a substantial loss with no corresponding gain to the public. With respect to surrounding property values, we do not believe that they will be diminished. Many nearby properties have non-conforming setbacks and garages near lot lines. The existing garage is dilapidated. It detracts from the streetscape, whereas the bundled approach increases open space and has that new integrated architecturally consistent design. The garage is non-living space, so it preserves privacy, and the drainage improvements and benefit the property and the area at large. And the project will have a positive, not negative effect. Could you go to the elevation, Stephanie? And right here we can see, when you look in the lower left corner here, the front elevation here, it just looks much more consistent. We could do a comparison of a picture, showing how far back the dilapidated garage is and what its current shape is. But with the restoring the exterior of the home to pretty much exactly the way it is today, just giving everything a facelift, as well as the roof line and the garage itself, it looks like it's stepped back because it is. It looks like it is subservient because it's smaller than the house. So literal enforcement of the provisions of the ordinance would result in an unnecessary hardship. So the first part is there are special conditions that distinguish this property from surrounding properties, and we know that this is really the heart of the application right here. The property is a pre-existing non-conforming lot of record. It's a narrow lot, narrow frontage with a relatively large size, a relatively wide footprint for the lot size. The original construction and the placement of the house is that it's off-center, it's a little askew to the property lines, and that bay window affects the drive path or the drive aisle. Add that with the later additions of a rear deck and whatnot, this all creates, that pre-existing side yard nonconformities and the 25.1% coverage that currently exists. And as I mentioned in the narrative, even if we could hypothetically, raise this house, lift it, rather, not raise to bring it down, and then put it in the center of the lot, which is not practical and which we're not proposing, it would still encroach into one or both of the side yard setbacks. And so doing so would have precluded, and by doing so, it would have precluded any real drive aisle to even have a garage. If this lot were vacant, and we are here with you, in front of you tonight, proposing this wide of a house on a 49-foot frontage lot, we would find that to be unreasonable. But we are dealing with the lot as it was created over 100 years ago, and the house that is constructed and currently exists, and that's what we are working within. The bay window geometry specifically constrains the driveway width, making it unsafe to reduce the width of the proposed garage to either lessen or avoid the setback entirely. And a traditional side-by-side two-car detached garage on this narrow lot would require, again, it being placed significantly farther back into the lot, It would create less usable backyard, it would create a pinch point, and ultimately it would mean more impervious surface trying to get to that garage. In terms of, altering the main dwelling itself to be able to make that driveway a little more usable and maybe change the shape as the proposed garage is today, would be to fundamentally and tragically transform the character of the house by ripping, 2 stories of a bay window off of its side, which is not practical nor desired. The unique constraints of this pre-existing narrow lot, the large off-center house, the bay window influence on the driveway, the house being askew to the property lines, the dilapidated existing garage, which creates a pinch point, the pre-existing coverage nonconformity, and also the practical need for a 2-car garage, and that proposal without sacrificing open space and gaining privacy. All of these features are what show the special conditions of the property and necessitate the modest context-sensitive relief that we're requesting this evening. The integrated infill garage is the only configuration we find that delivers both reasonable 2-car parking while increasing rather than decreasing that net open space, maintaining privacy for abutters, and respecting the spirit of the existing building envelope that the property itself creates. Number 2, there's no fair and substantial relationship between the general purposes of the ordinance and the specific application to this property. The property and main dwelling, again, predate city zoning, and they obviously predate the current GRA standards. The original development pattern established the nonconformities that exist today on the property. As we talk about, as I've already mentioned, the purpose of setbacks and coverage is to create uniform lots, create uniform building envelopes, protect light, air, and privacy, ensure open space, prevent crowding. These are not advanced by rigidly applying the GRA dimensional standards to this lot and to this proposal. The proposed work stays within the spirit of the existing non-conforming envelope, and so we find that there's no fair and substantial relationship between those general purposes and this appropriate improvement. The proposed use is reasonable. It is currently a residential structure. It has been a 2-family for over 50 years. It will be converted into a single-family residence. A 2-car garage is also reasonable, and that will continue further and maintain as an accessory use to the residential use of the property. Replacing the dilapidated detached garage with the new integrated, architecturally consistent addition that improves functionality, aesthetics, open space, privacy, and the street relationship we find all to be very reasonable. We had sent out a letter and the full submission packet that we submitted with the ZBA to the legal abutters around us. We had a chance to meet with several of them on site to take a look at the plans, take a look at the property. The abutter directly to the right, one of 2 condominiums on that lot, she appreciated the time, expressed support for the project. The other condominium we never heard back from on that lot. The neighbors in back of us, the Gaffneys, also were at that meeting. They gave us positive support. The Edwards to the rear and left of us have expressed positive feedback. Happy to hopefully see that dilapidated garage get torn down. And the neighbors directly to our left also provided support, and they're happy with the plans. They're also going through a garage project right now themselves, so this whole little area of that neighborhood is really receiving a huge improvement. Didn't hear any opposition from anyone as of this moment. I know of no opposition, and we didn't hear from any of the neighbors that got sent letters from us across the street. So with that, I open it up to questions. We've got the homeowners, we've got the builder, and we've got Eric Weinreb on Zoom, and that's it, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you. Chair. not
Chair, I
comment.
know, it came out. I went with it.
Any questions for the applicants? Attorney, Mr. Rayo?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Looking at your drawing C-1, it's page 36 of our package. It looks like the survey identified that the neighboring property, lot 24, had a shed that was probably over the property line, but there is a note there that says existing shed was removed after the survey. I just want to validate.
Yeah,
that it's no
no, it's
longer
really
there.
interesting. The time the survey was taken, there was no work being done on that property. By the time I started working on the narrative and the application, all of a sudden, Yeah, well, there was some construction activity, but we didn't know to what extent. We had not realized that earlier in the winter, that property had received variance relief for taking down a structure as well as the shed and building a new garage. So that is confirmed. The existing shed has been removed. There are no encroachments. There was a large mature landscaping barrier there, tall arborvitae, that they chose to remove, which really opened things up. So we made sure, we wanted to know what their feedback was, because all of a sudden this mature landscaping was there, and now they're going to be looking at a brand new garage. They're excited for it. They're happy about it. There were no complaints that we heard from the Husseins. And actually, in looking at the length, obviously, of this garage is greater than a regular garage, but we're thinking it's brand new construction, architecturally designed, and it's actually going to work really well with it being as a buffer to the main living area. And I'm sure that plantings either on their side or my client's side will take place as well.
Which actually is an outstanding segue to my second question, which is, I do think that the double-length garage is a little bit of an unusual feature, and I'm just trying to understand, is there any other examples that you found in the neighborhood that you can kind of point to and say, here's some other, narrow lots with these double-length garages? Because it's different than what I've seen before.
Off the top of my head, Mr. Ram, I can't think of any stacked tandem configuration garages, but it's really the size of the house and the size of the lot that are driving this particular design, which is different, but just it really tends to work with this lot instead of throwing it in the backyard. And you see that building envelope gets really tiny back there, so if we didn't want any relief, it would be a garage that's taking up the majority of the backyard.
Yeah, I understand. I mean, the current garage is a single car, probably from a long time ago, single car garage. Proposing a double garage was kind of unusual in my mind to see a sort of a double length garage like what you're proposing. So, and then on page 4 of your narrative, page 23 in our packet, you have a sentence sort of towards the middle of the page that says, the proposed garage will function as a garage is supposed to, keeping cars and its potential pollutants inside and out of the elements. I'm trying to understand I've never heard of a garage being a source of pollution control. What is that being?
I think that line was speaking to the idea that when you have a car of any age housed inside, that anything that might be broken or dripping from that car remains inside, not on the driveway, which would be washed away with sheet flow or rainwater.
Okay. All right. That's what I have for questions. Thank you.
Mr. Neese?
Thank you. I have a question. I just want to make sure I'm interpreting something correctly. On page 4 of your letter, page 23 of our packet, you refer to the height of the garage as 16 and a half feet. But when you look at the elevations on page 38 of our packet, your figure A0, the height is shown as 14 feet. I think the difference is, I think in your letter you're referring to the top of the gable, whereas the architect is referring to the height as we measure it in the zoning ordinance. Is my interpretation correct?
You're absolutely correct. I had a fun little exercise where I was doing some rise over run to get the actual peak height. So they're showing the midline, and we wanted to put forth and talk about what the actual peak is, which is 16 and a half roughly.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for the applicant? Okay. I have a question, Attorney Gamester. The driveway, I mean, this is perhaps not really our purview, but in the previous, I know that the existing garage is dilapidated, but there was a turning radius there. This is going to be a very long driveway without any kind of turning radius, which is previously you had.
As proposed?
Yeah.
So, I mean, I would say, let me look at both maps, Madam Chair. Hold on one second. I mean, it looks like we're pulling that garage forward. I would say a good 50 feet. And Eric, he's probably sitting measuring the plan right now, so if he wants to chime in and give me a more exact scale. But I would say that as proposed, the backing out in that area, yes, it's still backing out, but you're not backing out nearly as much, even with that crumbling pavement and whatnot that was acting as a turnaround. So in terms of safety, we feel that the door being pushed, can you go back to the architectural rendering, Stephanie, please? So with, as you can see, we have a straight shot into the garage door in that lower left rendering, which will give us clearance from the bay window and the ability to safely back out and then take your time backing, across the sidewalk and onto Wybird.
Eric Weiner has his hand raised. Do you mind if I allow him to speak?
You can speak.
Go ahead, Eric.
Eric, if you're talking, you're on mute.
We're not getting him. Okay. Well, he can perhaps speak during 2-4 against, but, all right, are there any other questions?
Can you hear me?
Oh, yes, now we can.
Eric, we could hear you for a second.
All right, I think we could just get him during 2-4 against. He can speak to that question. All right, so
I think I'm here.
okay,
Can you hear me?
we can now.
Okay, sorry about that. It's Eric Weinrib. From the front face of the garage to the street line, curb line of Wybird, it's 58 feet. Previously, it was much, like Colby said, it was much deeper, and there was no real opportunity to turn around. It was,
All right, we have lost him again.
nearly, no, I'm here. It was 120 feet or so to the front line of the curb line from the existing garage.
Okay,
Did you hear that?
yes, we did.
Yes, no,
Thank you
absolutely.
very
So
much.
we know that the length is certainly decreasing by a lot, but I like what Eric said and pointed out again, that although the driveway on the existing conditions plan do show it getting wider towards the deck, I think his statement was that there really wasn't a turning radius, aisle there, or at least if there was one, it's a multi-point turn, so.
Okay, alrighty. All right, any other questions? Okay, so with that, I'll open up the public hearing. Is there any, oh, I shouldn't have gavelled, sorry. Gavel happy. Is there anyone here who would like to speak in favor of this application? And is there anyone here who would like to speak in opposition to this application? No one's on Zoom? And is there anyone who would like to speak to, for, or against? Okay, seeing no one rise, I will close the public hearing and ask for the board's deliberation. Mr. Ram?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I'll provide some initial thoughts. Overall, I think this is pretty reasonable project. I certainly agree with the applicant's representative that it's a pretty modest height, as they represented, 16.5 feet to the peak, 14-ish feet to the center point. I think that the deck, the setback for 2.8 feet is really to a deck, so that's in my mind pretty not impactful. On the opposite side, we have the 4-foot proposed setback for the garage. I guess that's like my only heartburn with the proposed project. Really is sort of this double length garage. It's kind of unusual. I do think it's going to be very visible both from the Orchard Street side, because that building for the condo is relatively short, and then with the sort of the placement of the structures on the neighboring property on Wybird Street itself, it's going to be visible. It also contributes negatively to the project in two ways. First of all, it is in the setback for a distance of 40 feet. That's a pretty considerable distance. Admittedly, again, I think it is a modest height to the structure. And then it's also contributing to the overage for lot coverage, right? So the applicant is asking for 5.1% above what is allowed. I know the representation was that's 5% increase. It's really like a 23% increase if you do when I did the math at any rate. It's about 418 square feet. The garage reflects 640 square feet-ish of that. So a half-length garage would save about 320 feet. Would not get you within the a single garage. Would not get you within the allowable coverage, but would certainly be closer. So really, that's my only concern with the project is sort of the size of the garage. I think I'd feel more comfortable with it if the applicant had requested a single garage, which is A, what they currently have, and B, pretty common. And, certainly the narrowness of the lot, I think, is a good argument for saying that there is a need for some level of relief for this project.
Thank you. Anyone else? Anyone? Okay. Vice Chair Mattson.
Yeah, I'll make a motion to approve the application as advertised and presented, if I got a second.
Second.
Your motion?
Yep. So going through the criteria, I'll take the first two together. The variance is not contrary to the public interest and the spirit of the ordinance is observed. And here, this proposed use does not conflict with the explicit or implicit purpose of the ordinance, and it does not alter the essential character of the neighborhood or threaten public health, safety, welfare, or otherwise injure public rights. It's a pretty reasonable ask, and it's true that the double-length tandem garage is somewhat uncommon, but from the street, from Wybird Street, it still just appears as a single family or a single garage in terms of width and height with the door. And I think this is tastefully done in the character of the neighborhood. The next criteria is that substantial justice is done, and here the benefit to the applicant should not be outweighed by harm to the general public or to other individuals. And there's no reason to think that that there's any harm being done to the public or other individuals here. And this garage and renovations here will certainly benefit the applicant. And then, the next criteria is that the values of surrounding properties are not diminished. And here, we haven't heard one way or the other, but there's no reason to think that this tastefully done new construction would diminish the surrounding property values. And then for the last criteria, literal enforcement of the ordinance would result in unnecessary hardship. Here, because of the special conditions of the property that distinguish it, there's no fair and substantial relationship between the purposes of the ordinance and the specific application to this property, and that this proposed use is a reasonable one. We'll start with the fact that this is a reasonable use and proposal. And then regarding the application, this, for one, there's a modest ask for relief on building coverage. I think it's reasonable, and it is more than offset by this proposed stormwater improvement plan with a dry well and some management there that doesn't exist as it is. And a big part of the proposed coverage are very not tall structures, such as an open deck and a one-story garage. And then for this specific property, it's an existing lot and structure that was built before zoning. It's relatively narrow, so pretty much any type of garage that would be aligned with the driveway as it is would need to be somewhat in the setback. And it's an improvement based upon the existing garage that is there, which was at essentially a 0-foot setback from the side yard. And then similarly on the other side, the only portion that is in the left side yard setback is an open deck. I think that's reasonable. And yeah.
Okay. Mr. Sullivan, do you have anything to add, and do you agree with everything that the motion
I
maker
agree with
says?
everything that's been said.
Okay, nothing to add, okay. So the motion is to approve the application as presented and advertised, and I will start.
Some comments.
Sorry.
Are we all comments?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. Really, a question for staff. On page 6 of the staff memo, page 17 of our packet, it says, staff notes that the right side yard setback was noticed as 3 feet where 10 feet is required. But I thought that what the chair read into the record was a 2.5 foot right side yard setback. Is that note still applicable? Is that anything that Mr. Mattson needs to include
It
in his
is
motion?
not, and I apologize, that should have been removed. We corrected the record when we renoticed.
Okay.
Between last month and this month, so it's no longer applicable.
Perfect, thank you.
Okay, anything else? All right. So the motion is to approve as presented and advertised. Mr. Lucas?
Yes.
Mr. Neese?
Yes.
Vice Chair Mattson?
Yes.
Mr. Rayam?
No.
Mr. Sullivan?
Yes.
And the chair votes no. But you approve, 4-2. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay. So we'll move on to the next order of business, which is old business D. Let me make sure I'm not skipping something here. Yes. The request of Michael J. Farelli, owner, for property located at 0 Joffrey Avenue and 18 Barberry Lane, whereas relief is needed to construct a single-family home on a vacant lot, which requires the following. 1, a variance from section 10.521 to A, allow for 0 feet of street frontage where 100 feet is required. B, allow for 12,185 square feet of lot area where 15,000 square feet is required. C, allow for 12,185 square feet of lot area per dwelling where 15,000 square feet is required. And 2, a variance from section 10.1114.31 to allow for 2 driveways on a single lot where 1 is permitted. Said properties are located on Assessor Map 233, Lot 135, and Lot 131, and lie within the Single Residence B District. Who is here to speak to this application?
Good evening, Madam Chair and members of the board. Darcy Pizer on behalf of Mike Farelli. Mr. Farelli is here with me this evening, as is John Chagnon from Ambit Engineering. So as Madam Chair stated, Mr. Farelli is seeking several variances tonight, which will ultimately allow him to create driveway access across his lot, which is identified by the city as 0 Joffrey Avenue. It is in the SRB zone. It's identified as tax map 233, lot 135. I'll call it 0 Joffrey Avenue for our purposes tonight. So Mike Farelli is seeking to create access to this lot, which it will be a driveway to be constructed across his abutting property that's owned by him, which is located at 18 Barberry Lane. It is directly to the south of the locus on that plan there. The driveway will be 15 feet wide and will run across the westerly side of Mike's property at 18 Barberry to connect to the back lot. The construction of the driveway will eventually allow Mike to build a home on the lot. It's presently landlocked with no access. So accordingly, Mike is here tonight seeking variances to allow for 0 feet of frontage on the public street where 100 feet is required and 0 exist, to allow for a lot that will be 12,185 square feet where 15,000 square feet is required, to allow for 12,185 square feet of lot area per dwelling unit where 15,000 is required, and to allow for 2 driveways on a single lot where 1 is permitted under the site plan review regulations. So 0 Joffrey Avenue is it's a legal lot of record. It is shown on a recorded 1918 subdivision plan entitled Pershing Terrace that was submitted as Exhibit A to our variance narrative. So on that plan, the area that now comprises our property is lots 37 and 38, which were merged at some point in time prior to Mike's ownership, actually increasing the size of what is today the property. Joffrey Avenue is also shown as a public way on that plan. And the city has given an opinion that Joffrey Avenue has never been accepted as a public street. So it is therefore a paper street. Other lots on Joffrey Avenue have been developed with residences, but are accessed via Folk Avenue. Not sure how to pronounce that word.
Foch.
Foch.
And it's Joffre. Joffre.
Okay. Oh, all right.
Named after Marshal Joseph Joffre.
Okay. Now we know. So factoring in the fact that Joffre is a paper street, the additional square footage which you would add to the property by running its lot lines to the center line of the paper street, we did not actually use that additional square footage in our calculation for purposes of the application, but for your information, doing so would increase the square footage of the property to 14,152 square feet. While we do believe that an easement by necessity probably exists over the paper street to 0 Joffrey, the abutting landowners expressed some reservations to constructing a driveway down the paper street and granting an easement, and what that would do to impact their property. So Mike is electing to construct the driveway across his abutting property, therefore conveying himself an easement effectively. So the abutting landowners on Foch have expressed their support for this configuration, with the driveway running down the other side, not in front of their properties. They have submitted some letters in support tonight for the application, and additionally, the owner across the street on Barbary Lane, that's the Garretts, they have also submitted a letter of support. I don't know if the board has received those letters, but I do have one copy with me right now, and I could provide the rest after the meeting. Additional.
Have them. They're placed at our
Great.
places.
Thank you. Turning to the criteria, the requested variances are not contrary to the spirit and intent of the ordinance. So allowing for a second driveway across Mike's property at 18 Barbary to create access to the rear lot so that it can be developed with a residence would not create any overcrowding of the surrounding lots or otherwise alter the essential character of the neighborhood. The area is largely wooded. 0 Joffrey is itself cleared, but it is surrounded by a wooded buffer. Additionally, there is a large amount of vacant land to the west that's encumbered by both utility easements for the power lines and then also the railway easement, along with the paper street to the north. And the driveway access and the easement is required not only to create access to the lot, but it would also create adequate and safe access for vehicles, including emergency vehicles. The access point is located at the end of what is essentially a dead-end street on Barbary Lane. So there will be no impact at all really on traffic or pedestrian use of the area by the creation of a second driveway. Therefore, there are no real health, safety, or welfare concerns created by granting these variances. Next, substantial justice would be done by granting the variances. Mike has owned these separate lots of record for some time now and did purchase it with the intention of eventually developing this lot. The lot itself is not markedly undersized and not any more so than many surrounding lots in the area. The lots in this area are a good mix of sizes. However, there are some oversized and undersized lots in the area. The lot additionally, of course, predates current zoning. There would be no gain to the public by denying the variances, given how not densely developed this area is, and the fact that it's surrounded to the west by entirely vacant land. However, there would be a significant loss to Mr. Forelli if he were prohibited from placing an otherwise conforming home on the lot. The surrounding property values will not be diminished. I did mention that the other property owners of surrounding properties have expressed support for the project, not only the driveway, but the eventual placement of a home on the property. Any house that is going to be built will meet or exceed the applicable setbacks and will not crowd any surrounding homes. There's a good amount of space between this lot and any surrounding residences. The example home that's shown on the plan, and while this is only used as an illustrative example, it would be moderately sized, and this particular home results in only 15% of building coverage on the property and is, as you can see, within all applicable setbacks. And that's not factoring in, using the area of the paper street in this lot area calculation. Finally, literal enforcement of the ordinance would result in an unnecessary hardship. So there are quite certainly special conditions on this property such that there is no fair and substantial relationship between the purpose of the lot area, driveway, and frontage requirement provisions of the ordinance and their specific application here. Of course, those provisions are, the general purpose is to protect the light, air, and safe and space and safety of abutters, to allow for, adequate traffic and pedestrian safety access, and to prevent the overcrowding of lots. The way that this lot is configured and the way that the driveway point is configured and its location at the end of a dead-end street really does not bear a fair and substantial relationship to those provisions such that the variances should not be granted. As far as special conditions, the property is a separate and legal existing non-conforming lot of record. It has been otherwise left landlocked and undevelopable without zoning relief, at least for the lot area and frontage components. Those factors, the lack of adequate lot area and the lack of frontage on a public street, was through no act of the applicant or any immediate predecessors, but instead as a function of its creation by the 1918 subdivision, which actually the lot area factor has since been improved by that merger of those two lots on the subdivision plan. Theoretically, Mr. Farrelly could seek to demonstrate an easement by necessity down the paper street and obtain access that way, but in collaboration and consideration of the surrounding lot owners and to minimize the impact that his project would have on their properties, he's elected to construct driveway access across his own abutting property. And then finally, the proposed use is a reasonable one. Eventually, this will be used as a single-family home, which is permitted in the SRB district. For those reasons, we request that you vote to grant the requested variances, and I'm happy to answer any questions that the board may have.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for the applicant's attorney? Mr. Ram?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So looking at the first page of your application narrative, it's page 46 of our packet. And you talked to it a little bit, but you say it is the city's opinion that any rights it had in the paper street, referring to Joffre, to the abutting landowners, reverted to the abutting landowners. Could you tell me, how is that city opinion captured? Is there anything in writing from the city regarding that?
I'm told it was a work session meeting between the planning staff and Mr. McCourt, but I didn't have anything in writing to that effect. I believe it was a work meeting.
Okay. And my concern stems from a project that actually occurred in my neighborhood where an applicant was insisting the city's opinion was that a street was not accepted, and ultimately when a written opinion was provided by the legal department, it said it actually was a city street. So that's sort of just the origin of my concern. Is there a plan, or has it already happened, that a deed has been recorded that includes that additional area of basically as allowed by the RSA, the half of the paper street, or is there intent to create such a deed?
Not that I'm aware of, but I'm sure that would be greatly appreciated by all parties with abutting land on Joffre Avenue. So we would be happy to follow up with that. But to my knowledge, there's no plan in place right now. Oh, I've got Ms. John Shagnon here. I'd like to say a word.
So I attended that meeting with the legal department, and some of the discussion there was about that it's never been constructed, and would the city be interested in constructing it if the applicant wanted to construct it? And the response was that it wouldn't make sense to construct that as a city street. You know, you may have a right to potentially construct on an old subdivision plan a street where there was one laid out, but the city was not interested in that due to the fact that you would not be able to have a nice terminus at the end of it for maintenance and snow plowing and stuff like that. If that helps your understanding of what the city, what is meant in the legal brief.
Okay. Yeah, and so representatives from the city's legal department were part of that meeting? Is that what you're stating?
It was a meeting to find out if, what would be the appropriate course of action, given that it was a paper street.
Yeah.
And so we talked about building it out or just putting a driveway on it. And so what is written up was an accurate account of the meeting.
Okay. And you might want to hang out because I think
Yep.
some of my additional questions might, if I
Sure.
may continue, Madam Chair. So I'm not sure, your page, there's no page numbering on your narrative, but page 48 of our packet, there is, it notes that because there is no street, basically we're asking for a 0 front or 0 foot street frontage. The property technically has no front yard by definition. And currently per our zoning, it's kind of a moot point because it's 30 feet for the front yard, 30 feet for the rear yard. But I'm just wondering, is there any proposal with this? Should it be accepted of what will constitute the front yard? Should in the future that the zoning change?
So
What will be the front yard?
the applicant's letter says that we used the southerly boundary, the boundary that's parallel to Barbary Lane, and called that a front, and then set back from there. It is an interesting point that on the city tax map, it's a paper street, so
Right.
you might call that frontage, and certainly you could put the front setback there. But then once the reversions happen, it's not even on a tax map as frontage. So I hope that answers the question. I think that.
It does, yeah. I'm just curious. Again, it's kind of a moot point for our current zoning, but if in the future something were to change, it just creates kind of a conundrum, and we've had a lot of arguments on the board, or, a lot of discussion on the board, I should say, not arguments, about front yards, side yards, rear yards, et cetera. Page 51 of our packet, it's the drawing. Unfortunately, the scanned version that was provided to us is a little difficult to read at spots, so I do have a couple questions on that. I think I'm reading that the lot area of the existing Barbary Lane lot 131 has a lot area of 17,285 square feet. Is that correct?
Is that the
It's
lot that is going to be burdened by the driveway?
correct.
Yeah. So 18 Barbary, yeah. We did take into account that if that driveway was built, it would be impervious area, so we did a calculation
Yeah.
to show that.
I'm just trying to validate that number. Is that
That lot area 17,295, that's in the box.
295? Okay.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. Again, it's
Hard to read.
what got scanned in wasn't super high res, so it's a little tough to read those details. And then, so by my calculation, and again, if you were to take the additional lot area that is allowed by the RSA of the paper street, so that's 17,295 plus 14,152 is 31,447 square feet, which is more than twice the requirement for lot area for two lots, right? So it's 15,000 square feet. Was there, and obviously you would have to go through a lot line revision, but was there any discussion with the client on doing a lot line revision to put that driveway property as part of the rear lot, as opposed to making it a, easement across the existing lot, and try to rework some of the property lines to be able to even out and keep 15,000 square feet in the front lot?
Yeah, that's a fairly well-stated proposition. I think you'd be here for potentially a 58-foot front variance where 100 is required, so.
Sure, but it would give you frontage on Barbary Lane,
Right.
where you currently have 0, you'd have 58. I agree it
Yes.
doesn't meet the 100, but 58 is, infinitely more than 0, but it is, it's certainly, closer to at least representing some kind of frontage on Barbary Lane. Oh, I mean, you probably also would need like a setback variance for the existing garage if the owner wanted to keep that. You would have to maybe move that. But I was just curious if there was any discussion along those lines, if that was something that's put forward. And then the need for a second driveway, the need for an easement, the owner of the back lot would then be, owning and paying for their own driveway. It just seems cleaner in my mind.
Yeah, I think those are great points. I think the issue for the applicant is being able to know that he's going to be able to build on that lot is sort of paramount. But those refinements are certainly good ideas to consider.
Yeah, and one other factor too to think about is that if you had a front lot line on Barbary Lane, then the lot line between lot 131 and 135 then becomes a side yard, which only requires a 10-foot setback. So you gain 20 feet there without having to affect the building envelope. So just another point. That's all I have, Madam Chair.
Yeah, I often sometimes wonder there's different interpretations of the setback lines as we've gone over on some applications. Would you still have to have a front setback on that side going east-west as you come back up? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, somewhat notoriously, the application between Austin and Coffin's Court that came before us, the applicant kind of did the same thing because basically in our ordinance it says that any lot line that is not a front or rear lot line is a side lot line. So that's where it leads to that sort of given the 10-foot setback envelope. That's all I have, Madam Chair. Thanks.
That's it, you sure?
I am sure.
Any other questions for the applicant's representative?
I have a question.
Mr. Sullivan?
So if I understand this correctly, Mr. Frelli owns 2 adjacent lots, and with the lot in question, the proposal is that the access to that lot would be across the lot next to it in the same ownership. Do I have that right?
Correct, yes. Mr. Farelli would convey an easement across his property to the south at 18 Barbary to connect to the rear lot.
So how and when would you propose to create that access?
Well, it wouldn't need to be created until the rear lot was conveyed. But I don't know that there is any present intent that this is being applied for without a proposed structure plan because there's no immediate need to build the home. It will be done in the future, and the intention is that there would be no relief required. But once the relief is granted, they will be maintained as in common ownership for some time, and so there would be no need to create that easement until the time that the rear lot is conveyed.
But if the requested relief was granted, there would be a right to build that home tomorrow,
Yes,
and there needs to be access.
correct, which would be done.
So that's why I'm asking when and how would you propose to create the access?
We would be happy to create the easement. However, it'd be Mr. Farelli granting an easement to himself, or the city could hold that easement deed. However, if that needed to be a condition of approval, we would be happy to.
So that actually is my concern, the doctrine of merger. Mr. Farelli cannot convey an easement to himself.
Which is why the position is that the easement wouldn't need to be created until the rear lot is conveyed. We can ask Mr. Farelli to speak to his intentions of developing and when and how it might be conveyed. But until such time as it is, it wouldn't need to be created or conveyed. You're correct in that point.
Well, I'm still trying to get an answer to my question.
Sure.
Well, Mr. Farelli could, at the conclusion of the variance, create a new deed for 18 Barbary Lane with a reservation of the easement for the back lot. That's been done in the past, where there's a reservation so that he's not creating an easement to himself. He's putting a deed codicil on his current property that reserves the right of the other lot to have an easement when it's transferred.
So if the relief is granted, he would convey the lot that is not the subject of this application, but make that subject to
A reservation for the back lot.
in favor of whom?
Eventual owner.
The eventual, he could also simply declare an easement and record a declaration of easement to be conveyed to the future owner of that lot.
Well, I'm not familiar with that. So he would just declare a declaration of easement, not in favor of anybody?
Record the subdivision, or record the variance plan with a declaration of easement, yes. We've seen that done before.
Anything else, Mr. Sullivan?
I think I've gotten all the answer I'm gonna get.
Okay. Mr. Nees?
I've got a question, but I'm not sure if it's for the applicant or for staff. There's a statement in the application that the driveway provides adequate access for emergency vehicles. Has that been verified with, I don't know, the fire department or emergency services in the city?
So the driveway permit application is before the DPW now, but they cannot move forward with the application until the variances are granted.
I can also add, I checked with the fire department and they're comfortable moving forward with the configuration as
With the
shown.
size.
Yeah.
Thank you.
If I may though, Madam Chair, but there is no, this would not go before the Technical Advisory Committee per se, right? It's just a wetland CUP is the only reason why they would be going for the planning board? Okay. So it's not the more formal opportunity for the fire department to weigh in?
Correct.
Okay.
But they do have to approve the driveway permit.
Okay. Yeah.
Any other questions? Wait, let me just see if anybody else, okay. Go ahead, Mr.
Yeah, and this is a question for staff. I just to validate, so, you know, in our descriptor for the legal notice, there's really two variances here. The 0 feet of street frontage and 12,185 that apply to lot 135, and then the 2 driveways applies to lot 131. So there's 2 easements applying to one lot here and 2 variances applying to one lot and 1 variance applying to a separate lot. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Anything else? Okay, so I just have a follow-up question for staff. So the only thing that this is going to the planning board is for the wetland CUP. It's not going through TAC. There's going to be no other review by the planning board.
Correct.
Okay, because there has been talk about redeeding, certain things like that, a declaration of easement. That's normally a planning board thing. They can require things to be moved around and recorded and stuff, so, okay. All right, thank you. All right, anyone else? Mr. Sullivan, you look like you want to say something.
It looks to me like they're creating a lot with no access. And I'm willing to listen to anything suggesting I'm wrong, but I haven't heard it yet.
So I think what I'll do now is, why don't we open it up to...
I do have one. Mr. Shagnon did just let me know that the creation of the second driveway on the lot, it does require some planning board action. He might be able to speak further to that.
All right, could you speak further to that?
Sure, I think, and I may be mistaken, but I'm pretty sure that 2 driveways on a lot requires a planning board approval. So that would be there'd be a CUP, wetland CUP for the lot development and second driveway approval.
I'll let staff look that up while I open it up.
Second.
Okay, you want to...
But also, if I can speak to the theory, I think, Mr. Sullivan, it can be accomplished. Think about a subdivision that creates a subdivision road, which is not
Right, approved by the planning board.
approved by the planning board, the subdivision road, but the road is not there until it's built, which is,
Right, but
you know, the approval of the lots is accomplished through the
But
board.
there's nothing here to be approved by the planning board.
We're here at the zoning board, so, yes.
We know where we are.
I think we can accomplish something, I would hope.
Okay,
Can I ask a follow-up question?
yes, you can.
John, can you just elaborate a little bit more what triggers the planning board review? I'm not seeing it in the site plan regs.
I can look it up while the public is speaking if they, I believe it's in the driveway reg, the driveway permit
Yeah.
reg, possibly.
Yeah, I'm not seeing it, but I'll do some more digging.
All right, so why don't we open up the public hearing, and that can be maybe addressed during two, for, against. But with that, I'll open up the public hearing. Is there anyone here who would like to speak in favor of this application? Okay, please step up and identify yourself and your address for the record, please.
Okay, so I'm John Whiteman, and I'm John Whiteman's son, who lives at 26 Fauche Ave.
Okay?
And I'm here on his behalf. He's 92, and he's just not going to make it here tonight. But he wrote a letter in support of Michael Farrelly's request to allow access to his proposed new house. So I'm just going to read verbatim what he wrote. Yes, so dear Chairman, I wish to support Mike Farrelly's request to allow access to his proposed new house from the foot of Barbary Lane. This access, briefly paralleling a lightly traveled, unmade dirt utility road from the Route 1 bypass, will avoid development of a much longer paper street from nearby Fauche Ave, a dead-end street, as well as destruction of a healthy forsythia hedge that has been an attractive feature of this neighborhood for generations. This is an important decision for a small neighborhood close to downtown Portsmouth, and approval will help preserve the city's well-deserved reputation as a desirable place to live and visit. Submitted with respect and deep belief in my adopted city's bright future. Signed, John Whiteman. So he's for what they're proposing.
Okay, thank you. Would you like to submit that letter into the record?
Sure.
Okay, if you could hand it down to Mr. Lucas. Is there anyone else who would like to speak in favor of this application? Is there anyone here who would like to speak in opposition to this application? Okay. I thought for a minute she was getting up. Is there anyone here who would like to speak to, for, or against? Okay, so is there anyone on? Okay, so seeing no one rise, I'll close the public hearing. And I'll ask for the board's thoughts and deliberations, and perhaps Steph has an answer for us in that short interval.
I don't have an answer. I'm not seeing it in the site regs. I did put a request out to one of my colleagues, but I don't know if they're checking their phones at this hour. The board could, send it to TAC for specific review. If you do that, be very specific in what you want them to look at. That's my only thought at this point.
Okay, all right, well, thank you. Vice Chair Mattson.
Yeah, I've got two comments. One is regarding the second driveway. I know that we've had other applications come before us asking for a second driveway, and I don't recall any discussion of a separate planning board meeting for the driveway. I suppose it's always possible they then did a separate application, but I know that second driveway on the same property is dealt with by us for a variance, but I suppose as a totally separate thing, it could also go before the planning board. And we just weren't aware of it. And then I guess the other general comment is that it seems like a little bit of a catch-22 with this. If we were so inclined to grant this variance, but if the only reason was not, or the only reason to be against it was that this issue of access. But then if the access can't be created unless the lot is created, it's kind of it seems like it would be a shame for that scenario. There might be other reasons why the board might be opposed, but just if that were the specific reason, it seems that there should be a way to address that.
You mean not that the lot to be created for the variance to be, it can't be created unless the variance is approved? 'Cause this is an existing lot.
Right, but my understanding was that the reason for these, or The reason why there isn't already an easement to this property is because these variances haven't been granted. But to get the driveway permit, which would then create, I mean, I understand the permit itself isn't an easement, but it just seems like a catch-22 of the access not being granted pending the variances, but the variances not being granted pending the access.
Any other, Mr. Neese?
Sorry, my notes disappeared. Give me a second. Anyway, to me, this seems like a pretty reasonable request. We have an existing lot of record that doesn't have any access to it. We are not creating a lot, as we've said a couple times. We're not creating a lot with no access. This is a lot that exists already. That lot in the back exists already with no access. What the applicant is proposing to do is to get access to that lot one way or another, in the way that he's proposing an easement across his other lot, the Barbary Lane lot, seems pretty reasonable to me. Now, I understand that there's some legal niceties that I may not be familiar with entirely about whether he can grant an easement to himself, whether he can deed an easement, those issues that have been brought up. But to me, that's really not our purview here. We're trying to figure out whether the easement makes sense, whether access across that lot makes sense. If he has to jump through, if the applicant has to jump through some legal hoops in order to accomplish that, that's not, to me, that's not something that should hold up approval. I mean, he will figure out a way, if he gets the variances, I'm assuming they'll figure out a way to have any kind of legal steps taken that need to be done to have this happen. Whether they happen after he conveys the Joffre lot to a purchaser, or whether he figures out a way to do that while they're still under common ownership, I don't really care, to be honest. I mean, to me, the easement that he's proposing seems logical. The fact that the lots are, the fact that the one lot is slightly undersized, either 94% of what's required if they take it out to the center of the street, or 81% of what's required if you don't, I think that's a reasonable variance to grant. So I would support the application as it is right now.
All right, thank you.
Could I respond to that?
Yes, you can, Mr. Sullivan.
As you've heard already tonight, if this relief is granted, the house could be built on that lot tomorrow. It's a lot with no access. Now, it seems to me that among other people that the board might be desirous of protecting would be somebody who might buy that house with no access. That's my point.
So, if I might,
Sure.
I don't really want to debate Attorney Sullivan here, but I think we have to think logically. How is someone going to build a house on a lot that has no access? The first thing the builder is going to have
Well,
to,
they could only do it with permission from this board.
assuming we grant the variance, right, I mean, if we grant a variance, they've got permission to build a driveway across the Barbary Lane lot, which will grant access to the construction company to build. Construction company's not going to hand carry the stuff across the lot and build a house. So the idea that a house is going to be built with no access, I think, is not really a logical argument. If they're going to build a house, the first thing they're going to do is build themselves a road to get there to build it. And if they've got the variance, they've got the right to do it across the Barbary Lane lot, if they get the variance.
So your suggestion is that somehow access will appear. And my question is, how and when will it appear?
Well, I mean, I would expect that it would appear no later than when they start construction on their house.
One would think.
You can say that if you want.
Oh, I feel like there's a little bit of a disconnect. I think Attorney Sullivan's point is that the applicant could build the house and then sell it without access. I think, Mr. Neese, correct me if I'm wrong, but you're assuming that the lot would be sold and then the house would be built.
No, not necessarily.
Oh, okay.
I'm saying that access will be provided no matter when the house is built. If the applicant is building a house, if the applicant decides to build a house on the lot, the construction company is somehow going to have to get to that lot. And right now, there's no access to it. But if they're going to build there, they're going to create access across his lot to build it.
Yeah, but no easement necessarily needs to be granted if it's still in common ownership.
Which is why they were talking about, and this is what I said, the legal niceties, that's for them to figure out.
I'm going to Mr. Am.
Thank you, Madam Chair. All right, we'll bring it back down just hopefully a little tiny bit. So going back to the driveway, I know Mr. Mattson talked a little bit about the driveway. To me, the problem here with the driveway is that this is not a driveway to the front lot. This is a driveway that is servicing a lot behind that has no other way of accessing it. And this is where my concern comes in about, you know, the concerns for emergency services response, right? So Barbary Lane is already a very narrow street. I did get to go down. I had never been down Barbary Lane before in my life before today. It's incredibly narrow, interesting little neighborhood. I kind of like it. But at the same point in time, a very narrow Barbary Lane that is then converting into a driveway that's probably going to be as wide, if not maybe even a little bit wider than Barbary Lane. And my concern is that is the only way that the fire department can get their vehicles to a potential home that is built on this back lot. So what's being kind of created here, because of this zero lot line frontage on any kind of road, is a lot of these sort of strange situations. And again, you know, Mr. Shagnan's kind of said, well, I think the planning board kind of gets involved with two driveways. But again, this really isn't two driveways servicing one lot. It's one driveway servicing the front lot, one driveway servicing a rear lot, and being the only way that emergency services can realistically get there. So, and I'm not saying it's not possible. In fact, I actually kind of like this project. I think that there's potential there. I just think that the fact that this lot has no frontage on a street is kind of creating some of these bizarre conundrums of easements and who really is reviewing this to make sure that they are comfortable with it for these concerns. And I guess, Madam Chair, you can decide if you want to let Mr. Shagnon speak. He may have an answer to the planning board issue or not.
No, the public hearing is
Okay.
been closed, so we're going to muddle away on our own. So,
All right. So just to continue my argument, so with regards to the driveway, I think that's my personal kind of biggest concern with what's the way it's kind of been proposed here. And then there is sort of, okay, we currently have two lots in common ownership. Most likely we're going to end up with two lots in separate ownership, but that's not necessarily the case. I mean, we could have this driveway that kind of goes all the way back out to this other lot that could remain in common ownership. There's a question of eventually it'll be an easement across somebody else's property. And then there's also the issue that they really have not settled the question of are they planning to include which I think they have perfect right to, half of the paper street that used to exist, Joffre Avenue, in my mind, I would have appreciated before they came before us that they could demonstrate that they have more square footage. Now, there is, again, two substandard aspects of that parcel behind it, which is this zero front lot line. Basically, it has no frontage on a street whatsoever, and it is still substandard the way it currently is, fairly substantial, 3,000-ish square feet. I think a lot less. It's maybe 6% under the 15,000 if you include, but they have not formally done so yet, but if you include the additional square footage that's allowed by taking by right through the RSA a portion of the paper street. I think that this backlot deserves a home. I think what they're showing is reasonable. Have a lot of concerns about how they get in there because, again, it kind of seems to be short-circuiting some of the procedures, right? And that's why I kind of was thinking about it. And if the applicant were to, somehow rework the lot lines, and admittedly that now means they need to go before the planning board, but it also means, for a lot line adjustment, but it also means a lot of these other processes would also start to get involved. And then they could potentially have some frontage, in my mind, on Barbary Lane that would solve a lot of problems, and I still think would give them the same buildable envelope that they are currently showing, or darn close to it, that to me solves a lot of the heartache. And, you know, approving a lot with zero frontage on any city street is kind of unusual. I'm not sure that I recall us doing that before. So those are my thoughts. I mean, I think it's a good project. I just think that the methodology that the applicant has chosen to get there leaves some problems in my mind.
Mr. Sullivan, did you have anything else to add?
I think, well, I'll just say this, I think there are solutions to the no access problem, but we just haven't heard it yet. If there was a way to provide the applicant with some time to come up with more detail, I would support that.
Vice Chair Mattson?
I don't know the exact wording, but it seems like some type of stipulation requiring legal access to be pursued. The variance is being granted contingent upon that stipulation. Because I really do appreciate you guys' concerns and thoughtful insight on this.
I think that might be the solution.
That is not a solution I would support. I think we have to vote the application up or down, especially given that, I mean, this is, it's been prepared by an attorney and an engineer, and I am very reluctant to sort of tinker with the applications too much. I think we have to act on it as presented and advertised. I mean, obviously that's up to the board, but, I mean, those are my thoughts. Mr. Nees?
Well, another possibility here, as opposed to a stipulation, would be to, as I've noted, I'm in support of this application, but another possibility would be to disapprove the application without prejudice so that the applicant can come back and explain to us how legal access will be provided should the variance be granted. Mr. Sullivan may have better language on that, but I'm trying to get at his concern. And the second, perhaps, is to get some sort of review on whether the driveway access does meet requirements. I mean, we had a statement from staff and we had a statement from Mr. Chagnon, but I think Mr. Rayom expressed some concern about that still. If we do that, they still, of course, have the option to come back with a slightly different proposal that might address, for example, I think one of the other suggestions that the board came up with, which was to somehow figure out a way to chop off part of the Barberry Lane so that there is, quote, frontage on Barberry Lane for the back lot. But I'm not presupposing which approach the applicant would want to pursue here. But that's just an idea.
Well, that is an idea. And I'd be in favor of that idea.
I don't believe that we've ever done a denial without prejudice. That's my problem.
We have.
I think, yeah.
We have. One of my first meetings, we did a denial without prejudice at the suggestion of member Geffert, I think her name was, ML.
Oh, yeah.
Just to clarify, is that that would avoid any issues with Fisher v. Dover, or? Yeah, okay, that was the reason for it, yeah, okay.
Yeah, that's the reason for it. I mean, if I might, I don't understand the legal concerns, bluntly. But I think we should give the applicant a chance to try and address them in a thorough way that we all understand rather than disapprove the application. I'm not sure my approach actually gets at the driveway issue, but it does give them an opportunity to at least come forward with documentation anyway from somewhere that says the driveway does provide adequate access if it's given. The board still may not want to approve an easement of that sort, but it does give them an opportunity to bring that forward.
So we do have an answer on the driveway and planning board issue. So Steph, if you want to.
Yeah, I reached out to Peter Stiff, and he said a second driveway does not go to the planning board for a residential single-family home. Can I give a little bit of, can I opine?
Yes, you can.
Personally, It's cleaner to postpone, to reopen the public hearing, postpone, and request the applicant come back with more information on how they're going to provide access and address these issues, rather than denial without prejudice. I don't know if this is the correct application of that solution.
Okay.
Yeah, I know that we may have done it, but I think denial without prejudice is not something that, Mr. Sullivan?
So I'm with Stephanie, and if the chair would allow it, I would reduce that to a motion and ask that the applicant address two issues when they come back. Number one,
Okay,
how and
wait, I
when-
need for, could you make a motion and then state it and then see if you have a second? So,
if you let me, I'll do that.
Motion
Then I would,
motion to postpone. is what you-
yes,
yeah,
I
we
would
need
make
an actual motion.
Yeah, I would make the motion to postpone and request that the applicant come back to the board with the answers to two questions. Number one, how and when will driveway access be provided to the lot which is subject to this application? And number two, why would it not be a more advisable idea to adopt the approach suggested by Board Member Riom and utilize that portion of the paper street in front of the lot as part of the lot, since the city has now determined it would become part of that lot, and thereby create frontage, significant frontage. I guess I could stop there. That would be the motion.
Madam Chair,
Wait, I just need to write it down.
Yep.
I'm trying to pronounce Joffrey right in my mind.
Joffre.
Joffrey, down. So,
It's darn Frenchman.
okay, so first piece of information is how and when will driveway access be provided to the subject lot?
Yes.
Can we just say 233, lot 135?
Sure. And then the second request for information, why is it a more advisable idea to utilize the portion of the part of the property that is a part of Joffrey Avenue?
Yes.
Okay. So do I have a second for that motion to postpone?
Madam Chair, I will kind of second. I definitely,
Definitely second?
I'll definitely second, but propose an amendment maybe that might be a friendly amendment if the maker of the motion is willing to do so.
If the chair lets you, just kidding. Go ahead, your amendment, Mr. Ram.
So, I mean, and I appreciate Mr. Sullivan's, kind of trying to incorporate what I'm talking about. I think that may be a little bit too direct. Really, we should be requesting information. I would leave it at giving the applicant the opportunity to come back to the first part of Mr. Sullivan's motion. And then the second item in my mind is the applicant's plan for adopting the portion of Joffrey Avenue, because I do think that is important to potentially to this application, because even if it doesn't, they don't do a lot line revision, it really does affect the square footage of the proposed rear lot relative to the requirement. So those would be the two things that I would ask back for, and I think those are both informational and in keeping with the chair's sort of perspective on that we can postpone to ask for information, but not necessarily direct the applicant. So if the maker of the motion would
I
say that'd
would
be friendly.
accept that as a friendly amendment.
Okay.
So the second would be stricken, and instead it would be the applicant's plan for incorporating the portion of the Paper Street Joffre Avenue.
Okay. All right. Please don't make me say this again. All right, so the motion to postpone is,
Can I put, sorry, one clarification.
sure, Steph.
The motion is to postpone the public hearing and the application to accept new information from the applicant that answers those questions.
I would concur with that to the month of, I want to give a date certain, so it's planned for our first September meeting. If the applicant needs more time, they can ask for that.
Okay.
if that's a friendly.
It's better to give a date certain, because then you don't have to re-advertise.
I think it should be September. I think
Yeah, concur.
give them some time. Okay, so the motion to postpone the public hearing, and what did you say?
In the application.
And the application to September 15th. To find out two things: how and when will the driveway access be provided to lot 233/135? And second, information on adopting the portion of Joffrey Avenue to ensure some street frontage.
Not for that purpose, but simply to add to the square footage of the applicant's lot.
And what does that get the applicant? That's just,
Gets them more square footage relative to the requirement.
all right, is there any discussion on the motion? Everybody's sufficiently exhausted. All right, so the motion is what was just stated. I'm gonna start with Mr. Lucas. I'm sorry, I started with you first last time. Mr. Sullivan,
Yes.
Mr. Ram,
Yes.
oh my God, oh, Vice Chair Mattson,
Yes.
Mr. Nees,
Yes.
Mr. Lucas.
Yes.
Chair votes no, but I'm outnumbered. So we are postponed with those items to be addressed until 9:15. So. Okay. Right. Okay. The next item of business is still under old business E. The request of Caitlin O. and Brendan A. West owners for property located at 315 Bartlett Street, whereas relief is needed to demolish the existing home and construct a new home on the lot, which requires the following: a variance from section 10.521 to allow a 9.5-foot left side yard where 10 feet is required, B, a 7-foot right side yard where 10 feet is required, and C, 60 feet of street frontage where 100 feet is required. Said property is located on Assessor Map 162, Lot 12, and lies within the General Residence A District. Who is here to speak to this application?
Good evening, Madam Chair and members of the board. Chris Mulligan from Hopeful Phoenix here in Portsmouth on behalf of Brendan and Caitlin West, who are here with me today. I'm standing in for Tim Phoenix tonight, who had to be at another meeting in a different municipality. However, I think this is a relatively straightforward project that we have before you. The property is 315 Bartlett Street. Brendan and Caitlin live in the neighborhood around the block on Dennett Street and have for the last 3 years. They acquired 315 Bartlett earlier in the spring this year. They're very excited about becoming permanent members of the community. The property itself is fairly interesting. If you've been by it, it is a very small, very dated ranch-style home that really, to me, looks more like a cottage you would see on a lake. It's fairly out of place in this neighborhood on Bartlett Street. More than that, though, it is very much substandard. There really was no thought of adding to it or expanding on it because it's really not appropriate. It's a very small, single-story home, like I said, very uncharacteristic for the neighborhood. Has 2x4 framing that wouldn't support any type of upward expansion and is just substandard in all respects. However, really the usable feature of the existing home is the existing foundation, which we plan to build upon. The existing foundation is just slightly encroaching into the left yard setback. It's at 9.9 feet where 10 is required, so it's a very, very small encroachment. and we propose to maintain that for the new redeveloped structure. The property is also non-conforming in that it has only 60 feet of frontage where 100 feet is required, and there's really nothing we can do to correct that, obviously. So that is relief that we require from the board as well. We're also requesting a right yard setback. It's advertised at 7 feet. The plans show that what we're actually going to be building is at 7.2 feet. We meet all other dimensional requirements. This is an interesting lot in that it is a very narrow lot at 60 feet of frontage where 100 feet is required, but it's quite deep. Even though it's deficient as to frontage, it actually exceeds the required lot size by a considerable amount, almost 2,000 square feet. What that creates on this property that is what we think a very valuable feature is that it creates quite a large backyard that we want to maintain as much as possible. In addition, when you sort of amalgamate the applicant's backyard with some of the backyards of its immediate neighbors and abutters, those are also open and open space. So you have sort of a large contiguous area of undeveloped space, which is quite unusual, in my opinion, for this neighborhood, and we are trying to maintain that very valuable amenity. It's just a very decent expanse of open space that you don't see in this part of Portsmouth because it's so developed. So these are some unique characteristics of the property, in addition to the existing minor left yard setback encroachment. The Wests, when they acquired the property, met with all of their neighbors and showed them proposed plans and talked through with them. As you've seen, I'm assuming you've seen in the packet, we've gotten letters of approval from all of the abutting neighbors and some neighbors across the street. So the neighborhood has bought in. Again, the project the proposal is to remove the existing substandard dwelling and replace it with a modern, functional, much larger dwelling that can support a hopefully growing family in the future. So with that, I'll just get into the criteria necessary to grant the variances. The first two criteria are that granting the variance is not contrary to the public interest, nor would it be contrary to the spirit of the ordinance. Here, you have to determine whether or not granting the variances would alter the essential characteristics of the neighborhood or threaten the public health, safety, or welfare. In this case, the existing non-conforming frontage cannot be changed. This has been a residential lot of record for at least 100 years. The home itself was built, the existing home was built in 1975, according to tax records. The essentially residential character of the neighborhood is not going to be affected by any of the variances that we're proposing. The setback encroachments are very common and similar to other properties within the vicinity, so there will be no threat to the health, safety, and welfare of the community, and the essential characteristics of the neighborhood will not change. Substantial justice will be done by granting the variances. Here, the board has to balance the loss to the applicants should you require strict conformance with the ordinance against some potential gain to the public. Here, the loss to the applicants far outweighs any gain to the public. As I've stated, The frontage is what it is. There's nothing that can be done about that. The left yard setback is an existing condition that we will be maintaining, and it's a very minimal encroachment. The right yard setback is one that is proposed because it allows us to build a much more desirable structure and maintain the open space that we have in the backyard without building into the building envelope that we have back there. So when we think about the purposes of the setback, we think of light, air, access, and the avoidance of overcrowding. All of those concerns, I think, are mitigated by the fact that we have such a large amount of open space to the rear of the property. So substantial justice would be done. The loss to the applicant outweighs any gain to the public if you were to deny the variances. Granting the variances will not diminish values of surrounding properties. What we are proposing to do is replace a very small, very old, very substandard home with a modern, code-compliant home that will increase the value of this particular property significantly and will increase values of surrounding properties as well. The neighbors that are most affected by this, by the relief that we're requesting, have all come out in support of the application. So clearly they don't believe that any of the variances will diminish their property values, and we concur with that. Finally, denial of the variances would be an unnecessary hardship. Here there are special conditions of this property that distinguish it from others in the area. The existing nonconformities in terms of the amount of frontage, which is a condition that we cannot rectify, so that is basically hardship per se. The existing left yard setback, again, it's a very modest left yard setback, but we're proposing to maintain that. And also the fact that it is, although it's a substandard lot in terms of frontage, it's actually a larger lot than is required dimensionally for in terms of lot size. So it's a larger lot than most of the ones in the neighborhood, and it has a significant amount of very valuable open space in the backyard that we believe is a very important amenity and that we are trying to maximize as best we can. So those are special conditions of this property that distinguish it from others in the area. There's no fair and substantial relationship between the purposes of the ordinances that we're seeking relief from and their application to this property. The frontage is what it is. It can't be changed. There's been a home on this property for quite some time without any deleterious effects, and there's no fair and substantial relationship between the purposes of the setback ordinances, which we're requesting relief from, and their application to this property. Again, the purpose of setbacks is to assure that there is sufficient light, air, access, and the avoidance of overcrowding on properties. This is a property that is so large and that has so much open space to the rear that the loss of space on the side yards is de minimis in our opinion. So there's no fair and substantial relationship between the purpose of the ordinances and their application to this property. It's a reasonable use. It's a residential use in a residential zone. Again, all of the neighboring and abutting property owners that we've talked to have voiced their support for the project, and it will be an improvement to the community. The relief that we're requesting, when you look at it in light of the number and manner of encroachments within the vicinity, they're very numerous. It's not out of character at all for this part of Portsmouth, so we believe it meets all the criteria, and we request that you grant the variances.
Yeah, thank you. Any questions for the applicants? Attorney, Mr. Neese?
I've got one, and I'm not sure we want to spend a lot of time on this because you're asking for a variance, but I hate granting variances that aren't needed. And so I guess the question I have is this idea that the property may have been held in common ownership before 1966. And in your letter, or on page 63, it says the applicant's not convinced that the relief is necessary for this. And I guess my question is, it seems like that should be something that could be determined, whether it was held in common ownership in the past. And I'm a little bothered by this may have been, so we're requesting a variance.
Well, I guess that particular variance that we need is for frontage.
Correct.
And whether or not the property was owned in common prior to 66 or not, we can't ameliorate the frontage requirement. So
I understand that. But
so I don't think it really advances the ball. I mean, if we could have removed that variance request, I mean, I suppose we could have done that. But to me, it.
All right, I get your point.
Thank you.
Any other questions for the applicant's attorney? Mr. Ram?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Looking at your Exhibit C, it's on page 74 of our packet. So a lot of the argument here is that we need the relief for the right yard setback due to the fact that we're reusing the existing foundation. I just want to validate, looking at this, which has kind of the foundation plan, well, that may be true, and I'm presuming some civil engineer has, validated that you can now put a two-story building on this foundation that was originally built for a one-story structure. But you are actually adding on some additional foundation, it looks like in this, about 7 feet on the front of the home and about 6.5 feet on the back. So the home itself will actually be 13.5, 14-ish feet longer, not only taller, but longer.
Oh, yeah.
And more encroaching into the, for a longer distance.
Absolutely, that's correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Anything else? Okay. Thank you, Attorney Mulligan. I'm going to open it up now to the public. Is there anyone here who would like to speak in favor of this application? Is there anyone who would like to speak in opposition to this application? We have no one online, right? Okay. And is there anyone who would like to speak to, for, or against? Nothing else? Okay, with that, I'll close the public hearing and ask for the board to make a motion or deliberate. Mr. Neese?
I'm prepared to make a motion,
And that motion is?
if no one wants to deliberate first. I move to grant the variance for the application as presented and advertised.
Okay, and is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Sullivan is the second. Your motion, please, Mr. Neese?
Sure. Just some preliminary comments. As the applicant has pointed out, there's some conditions here that can't be changed. One, of course, which is the frontage of the lot. And 60-foot frontage is less than required, but that can't be fixed. And so there are some other lots in the area that are perhaps not 60-foot, but similar frontage along there. So that doesn't seem to me to be a huge issue. Really, the only change here is from existing conditions is in the right yard setback, and that's a relatively minor change. So having pointed those out, I'll address the criteria in order. I'm going to take the first two criteria together, and I'll only state it one time then. I don't see any way granting these variances will adversely affect the health, safety, or welfare of the neighborhood. It will have no effect on light and air. It does not alter the essential characteristics of the neighborhood. All of these homes are going to be similar. This will be a better house than what is there, without a doubt. Granting the variance would do substantial justice. I can't see any benefit to the public by denying the relatively small relief that is being requested here that would outweigh the harm to the applicant if we deny the requested variances. Granting the variance would not diminish the values of surrounding properties. No evidence has been presented. We've seen letters of support from, I think, all of the abutters. None of them have raised the issue, so I don't see any evidence that this would, in fact, diminish the value of surrounding properties. There are some special conditions to the lot, as is the case with many of the lots in Portsmouth. This existing lot predates the development of the ordinance. It is a narrow lot that is lengthy, as has been pointed out. It actually exceeds the lot size for the area. The frontage cannot be corrected, but it is nearly, I think, 2,000 square feet larger than the minimum lot size, so lot coverage, even with the minor setback relief that's being provided, is not going to be an issue. Because of all this, these special conditions, I don't think there's any fair and substantial relationship between the purposes of the ordinance and specific application to this property.
Okay. Anything for your second, Mr. Sullivan? Do you not?
Nothing to add.
Nothing to add. All right. So the motion is to approve the variance requests as presented and advertise. Discussion on the motion?
Oh, yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I will be supporting the motion. I do have some concerns. This is particularly for the left side yard setback, this is a pretty substantial increase in height of what's being proposed, and as I pointed out, it's a longer structure. But that said, the actual encroachment into the side yard is so minor that it really is impractical to be concerned about it. So with that, I'll support it.
Okay. I have similar concerns to Mr. Rayum. I think it looks like a big structure on this lot. However, it is within all the zoning limits, so not really anything we can do with that. Mr. Nees?
If I might speak in support of my motion, just briefly.
Sure.
When I read the application, I was concerned about the height, but when I walked down the street, there are some homes across the street that are perhaps not exactly as high, but are similar on heights and structure. So that's why I felt it would not affect the essential characteristics of the neighborhood, even though it is admittedly a high house.
Okay, so with that, the motion is to approve the variances. Mr. Sullivan?
Yes.
Mr. Rayum?
Yes.
Vice Chair Mattson?
Yes.
Mr. Nees?
Yes.
Mr. Lucas?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. You are approved. Thank you very much. Thank you. So I think we have 2 more applications, and I think it's better to take a break now before the next one. So I know people have been patiently waiting. We'll hear next 475 Broad Street, and then the last application of the night, 0 Bartlett. So we're adjourned. We're in a recess for 5 minutes. Thank you. thank you. We're back in session from our recess. We will move on to our last item of old business for the evening, and that is the old business item F, the request of Brian and Martha Rattay, owners for property located at 475 Broad Street, whereas relief is needed to construct a detached garage, which requires the following. 1, a variance from section 10.521 to allow 30% building coverage where 25% is allowed, a 5-foot right side yard where 10 feet are required, and a 5.5-foot rear yard where 14 feet are required. Said property is located on Assessor Map 221, Lot 96, and lies within the General Residence A District. Who is here to speak to this application?
Brian and Martha Rattay.
Okay, thank you. Please go forward.
Madam Chairman, members of the board, thank you for having me tonight. Martha and I were here almost exactly 2 years ago, originally asking for 6 variances on this property in order to build on this property. This lot has been incorporated by the city since at least 1904, as defined by the completion of the house next door that we restored. We purchased both properties, restored the home, and then built upon this property. So we were here July of 2024. You all approved, and you'll see in the packet that you approved all 6 variances that were requested from us in order to build upon the property, as well as building the house and the garage. All variances were approved, and we only recently found out that we would need to come back before you, as we're here this evening, in order to discuss the changes to the garage that we made, not understanding that we needed to seek reapproval because we actually shrunk the garage. So this evening, though it was presented that we're still, it's interesting, I was here to ask for kind of an amendment, but it is as though we're being presented the original request for the same 3 variances to build the garage. But to be clear, the garage that we want to build is smaller than that we requested when we were here before. And so in being smaller, that incorporates 3 main changes, which is that it is no longer a 2-story garage, but is now a 1-story. It no longer has a single plane roof, but has a traditional gabled roof, and no longer has a staircase in the back that would lead to the 2nd floor, because now there is no 2nd floor. And within the packet, you'll see plans that were approved, which were the original garage at a height of 28 feet. The new garage is a single-story garage, very similar to one that you all discussed earlier this evening, to the height of 18. It is a single-story, 16 by 20, 320 square feet. Very small room, only for 1 car, and the garage will be much, much smaller. We believe that the city will find the new garage much more in keeping with the spirit of the neighborhood. On this side of Broad Street, well over half the houses on Broad Street have an accessory unit, garage, some sort of secondary standing unit. Because of the lot sizes on all the houses on that side of Broad Street, all of them are encroaching the variance lines to the side, one side or the other. And in fact, this lot in and of itself is non-conforming in that its dimensions are 66 frontage by 100 feet long, which is consistent with every lot on that side of Broad Street. Additionally, the new size, scale, and shape of the garage is in keeping with all of the other garages that exist on Broad Street, and especially on our section of Broad Street. The next at least 7 houses all have a garage very similar to ours, either set left justified or right justified, that sit over the actual 10-foot side variances. Relative to the ordinance requirements, same as this evening, the variance is not contrary to public interest, and the spirit will be observed in the fact that we are, again, we were approved to build a garage. We're simply building one smaller now because of the scope of and the requirements of building the home. But we're seeking to simply have a very modest garage with our modest home so that we can store at least one car. And I don't see that there is any impact to the public at all by us having a garage, especially as it is seated in the back right-hand side of the property, consistent with others. So it's as far from the sidewalk as it can be and doesn't encroach on any type of view or privacy from the street side. Additionally, on our lot, the side, the right side that it sits close to and the back side that it sits close to both have very, very tall and mature vegetation from either of our neighbors where they can't see even without the garage into our backyard in any case, so they can't see any structures that would be built. Substantial justice would be done in allowing my wife and I to have a garage. There was not a lot of option because this lot is as small, lean in the front, and relatively short to the back. We spent well over a year simply looking at designs that would allow us to build, to manage all the variances, and the house itself manages all of the dimensional variances. It's only, or rather all of the dimensional requirements. It's only the garage that we're seeking some adjustment for. Values of the surrounding property would not be diminished, quite the opposite. We've had a number of people, neighbors and others, compliment us on what we've built and add that it has rejuvenated the neighborhood and how happy they are to have it, especially upon a lot that has been empty and known to residents of this city for well over 100 years. So we feared that we might come up against some strong feelings with wanting to build there anyway. And then the last is literal enforcement of the provisions would result in unnecessary hardship, especially for Martha and I, in that we would have no off-street parking and no winter protection parking. And for that reason, though we are asking for variances, we've only built a garage that is 16 by 20, so it could not even house 2 cars, but can house 1. Additionally, I'd like to make note that we have we've now been on either property for 5 years. We've kept in very close communication with all of our neighbors, and you should have in your packet 7 different letters, all of which were submitted from all of our abutting neighbors and numerous others in support and favor of what we're building. And these are the same neighbors that also supported the same letters in support of our work the last time around. So everyone, you'll know shortly when you ask if there's any public hearing, but there's no one here to speak in opposition to us, and everyone that would have spoken in support has submitted letters on our behalf.
Okay, thank you. We do have the letters in our packet. Do we have any questions for the applicant? Okay, thank you very much. So with that, I will open up the public hearing. You can sit down if you want. Okay. Is there anyone here who would like to speak in favor of this application? Is there anyone here who would like to speak in opposition to this application? And is there anyone who would like to speak to, for, and against? Seeing no one rise and no one is on Zoom, I'll close the public hearing. A motion? Deliberations? Hopefully a motion. Mr. Neese?
Madam Chair, I'm prepared to make a motion to grant the variance for the application as presented and advertised.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Another second from Mr. Sullivan. Okay, your motion, please, Mr. Neese.
Sure. Just a couple preliminary comments. As pointed out, we approved a similar application about 2 years ago. There was some discussion at the time about the height of the garage and that. However, we still approved the variances requested. As the applicant has pointed out, this actually is a smaller project, and the relief that is required remains roughly the same as before. I'll take the criteria in order. Granting the variance would not be contrary to the public interest and is observe the spirit of the ordinance. This project, these changes will not affect the health, safety, or welfare of the neighborhood. There's no effect on light and air. Does not alter the essential characteristics of the neighborhood. As was pointed out, this garage is actually going to be very similar to others in the neighborhood. Residential area, properties are roughly the same size, and this will fit in very well. Granting the variance would do substantial justice. I can't see any benefit to the public by denial that would outweigh the loss to the applicant. I can't see any benefit to the public at all, to be honest, by the denial of this application. Granting the variance would not diminish the value of surrounding properties. We've had no evidence presented that there are any concerns that this would diminish the value. The project is going to wind up taking a currently, well, it was a vacant lot, and make it similar to other developed properties in the neighborhood. And as I mentioned earlier, in some ways, this is a better design than the earlier approved design. With respect to special conditions, this is a little bit of an unusual lot. It is undersized for the zone, which is not that uncommon in this particular area, only has 60 feet of street frontage. It's subject to a little bit of a driveway easement on the left side of the lot. There's really not a lot of good places to put a garage other than the one the applicant has chosen. Because of these special conditions that distinguish it from other properties in the area, there's no fair and substantial relationship between the purposes of the ordinance and specific application to this lot.
Okay, anything for your second, Mr. Sullivan?
First off, I, of course, agree with everything that the maker of the motion said, and beyond that, I would just say that I looked at this with the jaundiced eye that our job requires us to apply, and I found nothing.
Well, glad to see thorough analysis there.
I see a little jaundice in you.
Okay, so with that interesting second, any discussion on the motion, Mr. Ram?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll be supporting the motion. When this came before the board the last time 2 years ago, I was one of the individuals who voted against granting the relief that the applicants were looking for. And I think that the size and configuration of the garage was one of the major drivers for that vote. I do think that this, whatever circumstances led to the new situation, I do agree that the new structure that's being proposed is much more conforming. Can't 100% say it would have gotten my yes vote 2 years ago, but I would definitely say that since the majority of the board had previously authorized it, that this, new structure replacing it, I think it should be supported.
Okay, any more discussion? All right, so the motion is to approve the variance request as presented and advertised. Mr. Lucas?
Yes.
Mr. Neese?
Yes.
Vice Chair Mattson?
Yes.
Mr. Ram?
Yes.
Mr. Sullivan?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. You're approved. Thank you. Okay.
Thank you all very much. I can provide some levity.
Okay, we're on to the last application that we'll be hearing tonight, and that is Roman numeral 3, new business A. The request of Boston and Maine Corporation owner and Outfront Media applicant for a property located at 0 Bartlett Street, whereas relief is needed to replace a one-sided static billboard with an animated billboard, which requires the following. 1, a variance from section 10.1224.10 to allow an animated sign where it is not allowed. Variance from section 10.1224.90 to allow an off-premise sign where it is not allowed. And 3, variance from section 10.1234 to allow a sign not specifically allowed in a sign district. Variance 4 from section 10.1241 to allow a sign not permitted in a sign district. 5, variance from section 10.1251.20 to allow a sign area of 378 square feet where the maximum is not specified. 6, a variance from section 10.1253 to allow a sign height of 25 feet and sign setback of 1.5 feet where the minimums and maximums are not specified. And 7, variance from section 10.1262 to allow 24 hours of illumination throughout the day. Said property is located on Assessor Map 165, Lot 14, and lies within the transportation corridor. Who is here to speak to this application?
Good evening, Madam Chair. My name is Eli Leno. I'm an attorney with Bernstein Schur in Manchester. I'm joined tonight from Outfront Media by Jenna Fisher and Barrett Norton from the group's real estate group based out of Hooksett, New Hampshire. Ms. Casella, would you mind putting up the photometric study plan, the overlay with the red circle? Thank you. I think this is an important place to start just to get our bearings with this clearly unusual, large, sprawling property that is in the transportation corridor based on the fact that it is centered by the railroad lines. As you can see from this plan, and I think this is probably important for the abutters who have stayed all night to discuss this as well, where this property is located, this limited portion of this is in front of the Pet Medic and sort of in the area of the Buffalo Wild Wings. And you see from our professionally prepared photometric plan where the general light spill, as it's defined in that study, will show. So this is not a situation where it's visible. I drove through the West End yards to try to get a sense after seeing some of the letters, making sure that this is not something that should affect those, and as shown there, that's the case. So I know there was some confusion about the location. I want to briefly introduce Jenna to have her give you an overview of Outfront Media, who the company is, and what their signage generally entails. Thank you.
Good evening, Madam Chair and members of the board. I'm Jenna Fisher from Outfront Media. So Outfront, we're a publicly traded company. We own and operate billboards across the country, and then, as Attorney Leno said, we have an office out of Hooksett, and we've been operating throughout the state for many years. We have about 230 billboard faces in New Hampshire. And again, tonight we're proposing to modernize this existing billboard that's been located along Route 1 bypass since 1955 with by replacing the single-phase static billboard with a modern digital display. Again, as mentioned, it's within a highly developed transportation and commercial corridor. It's located on railroad property, so we have a long-term lease with CSX Transportation. And Outfront owns the billboard structure and the billboard permits, and our lease allows us to access, operate, maintain, and replace the billboard. It's because it's railroad property, it's a pretty narrow right-of-way, so there isn't a ton of alternative uses for this portion of property. So opportunity to replace an older structure with a cleaner, more functional one. The overall height of the structure will remain the same. We'll be replacing the, would you mind just throwing up the photo of the existing board? So we'll be replacing the two-pole structure with a single steel monopole in substantially the same location. It would be shifting a little bit to the east given the additional width. All of our structures, they're designed by licensed engineers. They're over-engineered for safety, routinely inspected, and they comply with all state and federal requirements. Because it would be digital, that our operations crew, they wouldn't need to frequently access the site to install and remove vinyl advertisements, so much less ongoing activity around the area, and also eliminates the need to constantly produce a physical vinyl every time the message changes. From an aesthetic standpoint, the new structure would be a significant improvement. The existing billboard right now, as you can see, has two floodlights mounted on the top that run throughout the night, and they reflect light off the vinyl face in all directions, so those will be removed entirely, and the proposed digital display uses an internally illuminated LED screen, and that automatically adjusts to surrounding ambient light conditions. And we have, as shown before, submitted a photometric study demonstrating this. The illumination, it's measured in foot candles. Won't get too much into that, but it's kind of like a thermometer. Like a thermometer tells you how much heat is present, while a light meter tells you how much light is reaching a particular surface. So when we talk about 0.3 foot candles, we're talking about the amount of additional light from the display that is reaching a surface at that location. So it's no brighter than any other it's right next to that parking lot existing street lights or business signs, oftentimes less bright and way more controlled and directional. Each advertisement is a static display that lasts for 10 seconds before changing instantly to the next. 10 seconds is standard for the industry, and it's kind of evolved as a balance between advertising effectiveness and traffic safety. There's no scrolling, no flashing, no video. digitals also provide a much greater flexibility for community messaging, so they could be used for local public service announcements, as well as emergency and Amber Alerts. We do already dedicate 15 hours a month on each of our digitals to New Hampshire DOT PSAs. The digitals also provide a more affordable advertising option for local businesses because multiple advertisers share the display. I know off the top of my head we work with Atlantic Orthopedics, Kailani Massage and Wellness, Service Credit Union. I think about 70% of our business in New Hampshire is local. Separately, we have offered to discuss additional community benefits with the city, including removal of 2 existing static billboards elsewhere in Portsmouth. We do understand those matters are separate from the board's consideration tonight, but we just wanted you to be aware that we're committed to be a good community partner. So overall, we would be continuing the sign's existing use, the same use it's had for the last 70 years, while improving its appearance and functionality. So I'll turn it over to Attorney Lano just to go over the variance criteria quickly.
Thank you, Jenna. So again, as was noted in the staff memo, we do have multiple variance counts, but I thought it was well put that a lot of this relates to the fact that there's not in the TC zone transportation corridor a list of signage concerns. This is a pre-existing non-conforming condition. The variance requests here are really the only way that Outfront can modernize this existing sign in this location. The variances, and again, I'm going to take these en banc because it's 9:20 at night, and I know the board has been deliberating for quite a while here tonight. But of course, if there's a specific direction the board would prefer, I'm happy to discuss any of the individual counts in more detail. The variances are not contrary to the public interest. As you've heard multiple times, the questions are the essential character of the neighborhood or the health, safety, or welfare will not be diminished by the proposal. In this case, the character of the neighborhood has changed consistently since this board was put in 1955. Obviously, in 2021, the Kate Street project, the West End Yards, went up and changed the character from more industrial to a more residential area. But where we are really dedicated to the Route 1 bypass and screened from trees from the residential piece of this, we're really only visible from that Pet Medic location and a little bit from the Buffalo Wild Wings frontage, and then really on that Route 1 bypass area. So character of the neighborhood's not going to change. With regard to health, safety, or welfare, one thing that's important about these is that the federal DOT did a study in 2013 that found that digital changeable copy billboards, as we're proposing here, not animated, not changed, not movies, nothing but one advertisement, 10 seconds, next advertisement, instantaneous change, have no more safety risk than a static billboard does. This is a static billboard that's been there for decades at this point. It's not created a safety risk, and there's nothing that indicates that this would be a detriment to public health. In terms of benefiting the public welfare here, again, as Jenna mentioned, the company policy is that DOT gets 15 hours per month on these signs. We would offer the same to the town, so it can be as simple as something that says Old Home Day is this time, goes up for its 10 seconds, rolls through, or other things like, because these are changeable copy signs, it's as simple as if an email gets sent with the proposed graphic saying winter storm warning, please take caution from these hours, that can go up as close to instantaneously as you would expect with something like this. So really great opportunity. The obvious one that we've all unfortunately seen is things like Amber Alerts can override this system such that those go up immediately, something that's not possible on the existing static sign. Again, the ordinance provisions, looking at the spirit of the ordinance here, it's worth noting that at prior versions of your local zoning ordinance, there were signs allowed in the TC district. Again, pre-existing non-conforming signs are the zoning's perspective. We understand all of that. But the goals are protecting the public from distracting displays and maintaining and enhancing character of the areas where these signs are proposed. Here, we have an opportunity to update the sign to something more modern, more befitting of the way this area has developed. This is a fairly outdated sign. This is an opportunity to go to the newer package. So I think it meets those purposes. With regard to public interest, as you know, again, it's the balancing test between the rights of the applicant versus the general public. The loss to the applicant here is fairly substantial if we can't change, because without variance relief, there's no way to change this sign. So we're just stuck with the status quo until conceivably zoning changes, and this is not a high priority idea to change the zoning in the TZ zone for signage. There's few signs. We have one of the existing. But similarly, I don't think the public is benefited by denying this, because as Jenna mentioned, if you have a static sign, you generally have one national advertiser because it's more expensive, whereas 70% of their local traffic for rotating signs gives an opportunity that if you're a smaller business, you can buy in for a shorter duration or work with something that's flexible to you and try to get your message out to people in your general neighborhood. So it's an opportunity that does benefit the public, and I think it does meet the balancing test to grant this. With regard to the value of properties, again, as you saw in that photometric study, this is really only visible from Route 1. Public roads tend to be impervious to changes in value. We don't sell them often. And those two commercial uses right next door, I think Barrett, sort of tongue-in-cheek, made the joke that if you added up all the TVs in Buffalo Wild Wings, it's going to be probably bigger than the sign we're proposing. So I don't think we're going to have a value issue on any of those. Again, understand that there are concerns from residences. I'm sure we will hear about those. We have been mindful that this is not in an area where it should affect the West End yards. Additionally, there is that existing sign face that's closer to them. We're willing to take that sign down. It's, as the neighborhood has evolved, it's no longer really a viable sign. It's blocked by a tree. We certainly don't want to modernize it, because that is a situation where I don't think we could get that variance. I think they would very much rightly have concerns about the value of their properties, health, safety, welfare, et cetera. So we're only asking about this sign, and I think that's important to distinguish. And we would take that other one down if the board desired. With regard to hardship and the special characteristics of this property, you see, do we have a slightly more zoomed out version? Yeah. So you see, obviously, the topography is significant here. There is the raised railroad bed. There's not too many options about how to set this up. It's located near important road bypass and doesn't affect the other locations, not visible from the others. And the existing sign, the fact that it is a pre-existing use and a pre-existing structure, is something that the board can consider based on that Harborside versus Parade residence case. It's a consideration that this is something that's there, and the only way for us to modernize is through variance relief. We're reducing light spill, we're reducing vinyl changes again, so it's something where that waste product that's created, they do recycle it, but an opportunity not to have to print the signs up and put them out repeatedly. And yeah, so applying the ordinance as written means that we are stuck in the status quo. There's no opportunity to change the sign that's there, which is currently lighted 24 hours. It's currently set back closer to the existing railroad yard, same height. Both are off-premises signs because CSX doesn't really need to advertise as one of the nation's largest freight rails. That's not a business that benefits from that. And yeah, I think, again, it's just the majority of these are that TC District doesn't specifically have signage ordinance provisions. So I went fairly quickly here, a lot of information. Jenna, I think, was even more helpful with a dense dose of information about the company, and we would be happy to answer questions, which I'm sure the board has.
Okay, any questions for either of the applicants' representatives? I knew it was you guys. I'm going to start with Mr. Sullivan.
I think this might be the critical fact in this application. And I think also what you've said was the only people who will see this sign are cars apparently headed southbound on Route 1 and Buffalo Wild Wings. Is that it? Nobody else will see it?
Can you go back to that photometric with the red circle? Keep going. Yeah. So it shows that the board is angled to face the road, understandably, and there's a little bit of light spill that goes into that pet medic where that circle is, and that's the nighttime condition. That's where the lighting goes, versus again the unmaintained isn't quite correct, but the fact that the current thing is 2 floodlights, the point of that is reflection so that cars can see it. Whereas this internally illuminated sign is more controllable. If it's the middle of the night, it's only the 3-foot candles over ambient that Jenna briefly explained. Whereas if it's a bright sunny day, the sign is brighter so that you can see it, kind of the same way your iPhone adjusts if you walk in and out of doors. So it has that similar technology so that it's preventing eye strain from drivers, but remains visible.
Thank you.
Mr. Ray?
Thank you, Madam Chair. You touched on it a little bit. I'm trying to understand a little bit more about the technology behind the changeable sign. So I'm presuming there's somebody somewhere, probably out in the middle of the state, who sits at a computer and updates what is shown, and then it gets transmitted through cell towers or some other means.
I'm going to let Jenna answer this, but say that staff has been fantastic to work with. We had a picture with a sort of GIF that showed this, but we got it in too late. It would have been helpful. But Jenna, how do you?
Yeah, I mean, not to get into the nitty gritty, but yes, we have a separate, we call them the charting team, that receives the content. So it's basically, you just receive a JPEG, you upload it to the system, and then it automatically goes onto the billboard. Does that answer your question?
Partly, I guess I'm really kind of trying to come back to the public benefit that you're trying to say that this is going to provide with. You're providing currently public service messages apparently to the New Hampshire Department of Transportation.
Yep.
And you also indicated that the city could somehow make use of it.
Yep.
Could you give a better idea of how that works and, okay, what percentage of time are the messages shown at like 2 a.m.?
Yeah. So it's distributed. So we'll start with the New Hampshire DOT content. So we have a contact there. It's the head of the outdoor advertising there, who provides us any sort of, what do they run? Any driver safety content. And they'll...
Could you give some typical examples maybe? Or
Yep. There's, like, I know in the winter we do Don't Crowd the Plow. And then I think right now there's some get off your phone. Don't speed type of things. We're happy to share those images.
I've also seen the one recently. I think it's closer to Bedford, which has the number of fatalities, and it says traffic fatalities, 1 is too many. That kind of messaging.
Okay. And is this a service that is provided for free by the company as a?
Yep. It's just voluntarily. Yep, at no cost.
Okay.
And again, it's for the more town-focused piece. Again, I mentioned sort of if you have important festivals or any of that kind of stuff, it's as simple basically as sending an email to this person. We'll provide the contact information. The town is certainly not going to put something that is violative of the rules that the company has in terms of profanity or something like that. So it's not an issue. But again, this is a New York Stock Exchange traded company, a high level of what is allowed to be on this sign, not something that's going to be offensive. Well, again, also maintaining free speech rights, et cetera. But the town ones, we've seen various towns put up like congratulations to Portsmouth Little Leaguers, the stuff like that. Can be as simple as that, can be as winter parking ban in effect situation. Whatever the town sees the best use of getting out a message to the public is, that's a big benefit to this, and it's as easy as emailing it over to them, quick approval, and those can go up pretty close to instantaneously.
Sure. And if I may, just one more aspect of that is you talked about more local advertising versus national advertising in the signs. I don't know how many of these signs you've had to manage to change over, but how has that changed? Like what percentage of the business now is more concentrated on local signage?
In New Hampshire, it's about 70% local. I don't know across the company what that number is. But as Attorney Leno kind of alluded to, with these static ones, it's a lot of national clients considering the price point's higher. Obviously, this one, Duncan, they permit out and they just change copy constantly. And so, go ahead.
Yeah, hopefully you don't get hacked by a bunch of wayward AI bots.
We certainly
put
hope
their
not, sir.
messages out there. All right, thank you.
And again, I don't know if Jenna mentioned this, but it's 10 seconds. I think you generally have a rotation of 8 advertisements.
Yes.
Mr. Nees, questions?
Yeah, I got a couple questions about the design here. And recognizing that, as you pointed out, the transportation corridor is not in any of the existing sign districts. And so, as is obvious in the staff memo, there's actually no specific dimensions that apply in this area because there aren't any. But having said that, the existing sign is nearly twice the size that's allowed, twice the size of a freestanding sign that's allowed in any sign district. The maximum is 150 square feet. This is 288. And you're proposing to increase the size of this sign to 378. Can you explain why you're increasing the size to be 2.5 times the size of any of a freestanding sign that would be allowed in any of the other sign districts?
Do you want to speak to the size?
Sure. Yes. So I don't have the drawings for it. So the proposed LED sign face, it's 10.5 feet tall by 36 feet wide. So that is the standard bulletin size used throughout the industry. So while technically a digital display could be manufactured to any size, just as part of modernizing this billboard, we wanted to bring it up to that current standard. So that additional width would allow businesses to display copy that's easy to read along that roadway. And the height of the face is getting 1.5 feet shorter, and we'd also be removing that 2 to 3 foot tall apron underneath, so it would look have a slimmer
streamline
appearance.
the display.
So following up on that, it's still going to be 25 feet high.
So,
So
just
it's-
to clear, so yeah, 25 feet from the roadway grade, 18 feet from the bottom of the pole in the ground to the top of the sign.
Okay.
So that the top elevation will remain the same due to that topography.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else?
No.
Okay. I just have a brief question. So you had actually mentioned about the sign on the other side of the, okay, so, I mean, that's not the subject of this application. So, I mean, I just want to make clear, because there has been some confusion. There was some confusion in the letters that we got from people. They were concerned about the sign on the other side of where Bartlett Street is, so.
Yes, Madam Chair, and we did speak, we had a very productive meeting with staff here at the office a couple of months ago to discuss this. And again, we, at that point and today, remain willing to take that sign down. It was pointed out that it is slightly outside of ZBA purview. We're bringing it within your purview. If you'd like that sign removed, we are certainly happy to have that be a condition on any approval you may deign to grant tonight. Again, it's not a quid pro quo situation. It's just that sign, due to the change in that neighborhood, as well as the fact that I drove through and I know where that sign is and had a hard time finding it, just based on the fact that that neighborhood has changed. It's not viable, whereas this is a viable spot for us to modernize to the current size.
Okay, it's just that, just want to make clear that lot is not within part of this application tonight, so. All right, anybody else? Okay, thank you very much. With that, I'll open the public hearing. I would ask those who are in favor of this application to please step forward and speak. And no one's online, okay. So is there anyone here who's in opposition to this application? Could you please state your name and your address for the record? Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, Madam Chairman, members of the board. My name is Jacob Scarpacci. I'm at 50 Kate Street, which is in that corridor there. I'm speaking tonight in opposition of the variances requested for 0 Bartlett Street, that whole corridor. I understand that we're specifically talking about this side. The applicant is asking you to grant 7 variances, which bypasses the intent of the Portsmouth sign ordinance to protect Portsmouth's characters, both commercial and residential, and the public safety. And that's clear in the intent stated in that ordinance. For expediency, I want to focus on 2 of those. One is, of course, the ordinance that talks about it being off-site advertising. I think that speaks to the character of Portsmouth, as well as some public safety. And then the other one would be the animated signs. I believe the justifications required for these laws variances haven't been demonstrated. The zoning ordinance doesn't merely regulate animated signs, as they call it. It explicitly places them in a category of prohibited in all districts. This is stated in 10.1224.10. I do not believe the applicant has demonstrated unnecessary hardship. There's no special consideration for this site other than that it is a non-conformant site that they want to modernize. The property actively is used currently. It hosts the grandfather static sign, and the desire to replace it with an animated sign is a commercial preference to increase advertising revenue and flexibility, which I believe the Supreme Court has previously ruled does not constitute statutory hardship. As far as the public interest is concerned, I believe the animated dynamic screens are engineered, in the size and changes that they want to make there are engineered to command driver attention. If you're driving down there, what they're showing here is they're really targeting people that are driving. And if you, all of you have been on that road, you're moving pretty quickly down that road. It's a very busy road. The spirit of the ordinance in section 10.1211 states the purpose is to protect the public from hazardous and distracting displays. I think that applies to the fact that in that section they talk to not having animated signs anywhere, also talk to not having signs that are not advertising something on site. The city enacted this outright ban specifically to prevent visual clutter and driver distraction. Granting a variance here does not observe the spirit of the ordinance or the legislative judgment of the council. Lastly, although this specific sign is facing Route 1, this particular lot is rather long. It goes across a bunch of residential areas. So I think the intent of the ordinances for the character of both city and commercial, I would, as a abutter, want to not set the precedence that we could go against those, the intent of those. And also the argument of modernizing non-conforming signs, I think it's meant that for non-conformance you can maintain and phase out. I don't think modernizing it is something that is a valid judgment for non-conforming area sites. So it would really rely on all 7 variances to stand on their own merit. So with that, I respectfully request that the board uphold the ordinances and vote to deny the variances. And as a quick point of order, we do have other people here, but I don't think everyone needs to get up. Do we need to read them in or just say that they're here?
They can just come up to, if all of these people want to speak, I would just say, just come up, say your name and your address, and just say that you're in opposition.
Right. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Hi, Amy Kadugan, 50 Kate Street, opposed. My name is Celine Gribben at 50 Kate Street as well, and I'm opposed.
Thank you.
William Clark, 50 Kate Street, and I'm opposed.
Patricia Donaldson, 50 Kate Street, also opposed.
Michelle Ronchetti, 50 Kate Street.
And you're opposed? You're opposed, correct?
Yeah,
Oh,
she
opposed,
is,
I'm
yes.
Yeah.
My name's Wayne Ronchetti. I live at 50 Kate Street. I'm opposed to it. I also just want to mention that just looking at a quick co-pilot assessment of digital signage this large, it does state that the government study shows that there's 25 to 29% higher accidents where signage is located. So I'm hoping that the board takes that into consideration. As Jake said, it is a public safety issue. Thank you.
We have one person online.
Thank you, and we'll go to the person online. Could you please state your name and your address for the record, please?
Michael Thiel, if you want to take yourself off mute.
Michael, can you hear us? We cannot hear you. Okay.
Gonna ask one more time.
Okay.
Hello, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay. My name is Michael Thiel, Thiel. I own a property at 767 Islington Street. I would first like some clarification. I was having difficulty getting into Zoom to begin with, and so I got into it late, and it seemed like most of the discussion was around a sign that is on the Route 1 bypass somewhere near Buffalo Wild Wing, while the announcement that I got as an abutter discussed the signage at the Islington Street, Bartlett Street intersection. Are we talking about both of them, one or the other of them? What do we have here?
We're only talking about the one on Route 1 bypass. Is that it for Route 1?
Okay. In that case, I have little to add to the conversation. My concern was with the safety implications of having an animated board at what is already a very complicated intersection there at Bartlett Street and Islington Street. I do believe that the statistic would probably show a high increase in accident rates at that particular intersection with an animated board.
Okay.
So I have no opinion on this then.
Okay, thank you. So is there anyone else who would like to speak in opposition? Okay, we'll go to speakers 2, 4, or against. Second time speakers. Anyone else? Okay. So then I will close the public hearing. Yes, you can. That's 2, 4 against.
Oh, sorry. Again, I appreciate the joys of modern AI, but rather than that, I have brought the study that the DOT had. I'd like to enter that for the record. But one of the pieces of this was that on average, drivers in the study devoted between 73 and 85% of their visual attention to the road ahead for both commercial electronic variable message signs, which is what we're calling animated tonight, and standard billboards, said the study. This range is consistent with earlier field research studies. And then the results for both were well below the currently accepted threshold of 2,000 milliseconds because people look on the average of digital billboards for 0.37 milliseconds compared with 335 milliseconds for standard signs. Again, just
Do you want me to pass this around too?
Yes, our ability to take all that in, though, is going to be limited here.
No, I understand, but I just want to tell you on that synopsis that the findings are not the case that digital billboards are more dangerous. And the thing, again, from the federal DOT doing that study in 2012. Again, as the board is well aware, this is what you do every month. Because something is prohibited doesn't mean it can't be granted a variance. That would be sort of tautologically opposite the constitutional safety valve that is a variance. And then in terms of this being commercial preference and modernizing, et cetera, wasn't exactly correct that you can't consider those based on Garrison versus Henniker, but I don't think that was our point here. This is trying to have a better product, do something better for what we have with this existing site. And then, as you well know, these votes are non-precedential. So the fact that we have an unusual site based on topography, the shape of the site, the fact that it has this existing 1955 billboard, those are the conditions we're discussing here. So just because we get this doesn't mean that the board is required to look favorably if we or any other applicant comes back. And we also understand that this would probably be an incredibly uphill lift to try to permit a new sign. But the reality is that there will be a sign here either way because this sign exists. So we're hoping that the board would give us the opportunity to have a better product there. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right. So, last call, 2-4 against.
Could I just ask one quick question? Don't mind.
Of the applicant?
Just in general about the signage.
If you would like, I don't know if we can answer it, but you can certainly ask it.
Yeah, what I'm interested in knowing is this is one location that they're asking for a variance for. Are there other locations that this will set a precedence to this board to approve as well?
We can only speak to the application that is
Okay, just
before
one
us
at
tonight.
a time. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
While this gentleman's here, could I ask a question?
Yes.
Why would anybody on Kate Street care about this sign?
Well, there's a lot of, I'm assuming all of you are familiar with Kate Street. I personally have had complaints about the traffic on Kate Street for a long time now, with the trucks going 25 miles an hour, 14 feet away from the front door of where I live. There's just a lot of activity going along on Kate Street. There's lights, there's traffic, there's buses, trucks, ambulances, fire trucks. We have a signage already, as you know, on Bartlett and Kate, where the railroad tracks are. I think they were talking about taking that down, which I think is a good thing. I think with the modernization of the community itself, things like this just add so much more distractions to the community members and the taxpayers as well. It's a great area. It's a wonderful area to live in. But there's just a lot of stuff going on there. And I'm worried about my property values, to be perfectly honest.
So nothing specific to Kate Street, really, it's just in general?
It's the environment, it's the area. I mean, if you want to talk about Kate Street, I can give you many, things that I'm concerned about Kate Street itself.
No, I'm only concerned about this sign.
But with this location, as Jake had said, one of our members of our community said, it's dangerous. There's a lot of cars coming. I personally have some experience with digital signage where I used to work. We put up digital signage in corporations, and to be honest with you, after 2 years, those things ended up being decommissioned because nobody was really looking at them. As I think the attorney here mentioned, there's a very short window of opportunity for people to see that. A lot of people are using their phones now. They're taking pictures of these things as they're driving by because they flash up pretty quickly, right? And that's dangerous when somebody's using their phone trying to take a picture of one of these signs so they can grab some attorney's phone number, right? So I'm just concerned about there's just so much activity going on at Kate Street and that in the whole community around there. Lots of stuff going on there. Thank you.
Okay, 2-4 against.
Sorry, I'd like to add a couple things. So the address that was provided is 0 Bartlett. If you look at the property map that these variances are being granted for, it is significant. So you ask about our concern. What we saw is not one little sign. It's the entire property, which, as you've already stated, is quite large. So that would be the first thing. So there is no reference to us that is one sign. It is this entire property that is quite large. That would be the first thing. The second thing is the sign is from 1950. Since then, the city has illuminated billboards are not allowed at all. So now we're talking about something that is already a grandfather and turning it into something that the city actually says is not allowable. So that would be the other thing. The other thing is, in 1950, this was not a residential area. And the city has decided to turn this into a residential area, which again, we all appreciate and we live there. But now we need to treat it like a residential area. Thank you.
Thank you. Just one last time.
I have a hard time fundamentally with the argument that because there's been a change, something that's been there longer no longer should be allowed to have a place. That's actually a dangerous precedent, because this is a board that tonight has looked at lots with 60 feet of frontage. Not allowed today, but you modernized multiple houses on those kind of lots. It's a situation where if a city is going to improve, we understand that zoning is prospective, not retroactive. It's dangerous precedent on takings to say that you can't have something because we've now changed to 3-acre lots, all those 1-acre lots. We don't want those. Those are out of here. I know the board is cognizant of this, but it's just not something I wanted to let go unaddressed. And with that, again, I do thank the board for its consideration tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Great. Anyone else who would like to speak to, for, or against? And no one's online, so I will close the public hearing, and I'll ask for the board's deliberations. I thought I saw Mr. Lucas's hand go up, and I haven't even talked to him, heard from him that much tonight. Mr. Nees, I'll start with you and go this way.
Sure. I've got really two concerns here. The first is the fact that they're changing an existing sign to an animated sign. And as has been pointed out, animated signs are prohibited by our zoning ordinance. I went back and I reviewed a number of the meeting summaries from the planning board when they were working on the zoning ordinance back in the 2007, 8, 9 time period. As Mr. Sullivan can address, because he was at most of those meetings, signs took up an unusually amount of discussion time for the planning board back then. And the issue of animated signs came up repeatedly. And the planning board was dead set against animated signs and wound up prohibiting them. I find it difficult to reconcile allowing an animated sign here just because it's an upgrade, given that lengthy discussion by the planning board. I mean, I think if animated signs are going to be allowed now, that the planning board should revise the zoning to do that. The other thing that I'm concerned about here is the increase in size. The maximum size for a freestanding sign in any sign district is 150 feet. The existing sign is 288 square feet, and they're proposing to go up to 378 square feet. And the sole reason here really is because, as I understood it, that's sort of the standard size for these animated signs. It doesn't have to be designed. I realize that these dimensions do not technically apply to the transportation corridor, but the transportation corridor technically doesn't allow any signs in it either. So we've got a grandfathered sign here, but we're not just allowing the grandfathered sign to continue, but the proposal here is to increase its size and to turn it into a sign that's prohibited. And bluntly, I struggle with that. As has been pointed out, there would be potentially some public benefits to an animated sign, but I'm not sure they outweigh these other issues. That's where I'm at right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Vice Chair Massa?
Yeah, I guess I wanted to say a few things. Well, for me, the main thing is I've thought about this before from other applications. Is just calling it an animated sign is it creates an interesting situation where it often, technically it is animated because it's not entirely static in perpetuity, but there's entirely different levels of animation in terms of, at some point it becomes motion as opposed to just an instant switch from two still images. So I understand this being much more concerned about something that essentially looks more like a movie than which is just a series of stills but changing faster. So it's just like I could see how the ordinance would be against animated signs that are changing fast enough that it doesn't essentially seem static, I guess. I guess another thought I had is the difference between, I think a lot of signs might be considered to be like the name of a place as opposed to like a billboard, which is advertising to a traffic corridor. They just seem to be different applications, and so I could see why limiting the size of a sign of the name of a building or something being more restrictive than something like a billboard. I can also see why billboards are, they're not necessarily a desirable thing to have, but various locations could be more or less amenable to that. I think a lot of the concern here actually works to a hardship in that this is a really unusual situation where at least some of these variances are just because signs aren't allowed in the transportation corridor, which because you wouldn't think a sign would be by some railroad tracks, but at the same time this is a situation where this does exist, the parcel is a extremely unusual shape and unprecedented anywhere else in the city, and understandably with it being advertised as Zero Bartlett, there's reason to be concerned about what was specifically being asked for here, and I think seeing and hearing this application and knowing that it only applies specifically to this currently existing billboard that is facing the Route 1 bypass by the train tracks, I think it's at least a reasonable ask.
Anything from that? Mr. Ram?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. So, sign technology is changing pretty rapidly. Well, changed a while back. I think the city, we have tried to adapt to it somewhat. We certainly have had other applicants come before us with requests to change out a static sign, that they would have to go out. Oftentimes it was one that had little manual letters on it, and I got to go out, put, somebody up on a ladder and change out the manual letters. I would appreciate this new technology sign where we put it up and then I can, on the same sort of periodicity, i.e. once a day, I can just, be back in the office and change the information that we have for today. And this board has granted that. It is not considered, and our ordinance does not consider if it's, changing at that periodicity, that it is truly an animated sign. It's not doing anything different, but improving the technology and safety of those who are trying to take advantage of those signs. At the same point, that most of those applications were, associated with a specific business that was there. They were advertising that business, something about it. They were generally held to most of the other criteria associated with the sign, or that we found to be reasonable relative to the ordinance because of unique specific characteristics of that particular business. So I would say that this board has been far, and the ordinance itself is not completely antithetical to the technology that the applicant is proposing to put here. That said, I think that I have a lot of issue with the fact that I think fundamentally our ordinance is trying to say that, and I know the applicant has said, hey, in new places you can't go and put up billboards like what we have. Yep, that's definitely pretty clear in our ordinance. Somebody could still come and ask from this board to be able to go and do that. and we could potentially grant it because there's some unique circumstances there. But even what the applicant is asking for here, which really is an intensification of this use, you know, as Mr. Neese has pointed out, both in size, scope, you know, the animated nature of what they're asking for, I think is a significant intensification. And I think our ordinance is clear, and based off of how we got to this point in our ordinance and the public discussion, we have said as a community that, you know, off-site advertising is not something that we want to have. You're doing something that is promoting something that is remote to the location where that sign is being put. And okay, there's grandfathered, or I guess gender neutral, grandparented signs that are out there. They can remain, but they can't really be intensified. Maintain them, sure, great, but no intensification. I really think this is an application for pretty significant intensification of what would be happening in this location. And I think our ordinance is clear in several ways of basically across all sign districts saying that an off-site sign is not permitted. Additionally, I think the transportation corridor in particular, we kind of looked at and said, why the heck would you ever need a sign there? And so therefore our zoning ordinance is now silent on that, which has in turn led to this sort of laundry list of variances that the applicant needs to be able to be successful in what they're attempting to do. And it really just sort of accumulates upon each other. And I'm just not seeing where there's something unique about this situation that says, yeah, you know what we as a community have decided that we want for the city of Portsmouth doesn't fully apply to this particular instance. I think it really does. I think it's kind of the exact sort of thing that we as a community have said that we don't want to be continuing on. No intensification. It can get maintained. If there's some day where it's no longer economically viable to keep it up, then like the dinosaurs, it goes away, and we get one step closer to you know, this vision that we have for our community. So I'm really struggling to find any way that this would meet almost any of the criteria, much less all 5.
Any other comments, Mr. Sullivan, anything?
No, I think I'll leave it.
Okay. So I will not be supporting this application. I very much appreciate the presentation by Winston Shore and Outfront Media. I think you did a really good job, but I think that the zoning ordinances is crystal clear on this. There was a extensive community discussion, as Mr. Neese and Mr. Rayum have said. I think that this application violates the zoning ordinance in many different ways. I don't see any hardship for it. So this is not an application that I will be supporting, but I do appreciate a fine effort by you tonight. So with that, I don't know if we have a motion or more comments. I would prefer a motion.
I'm sure I'll make a motion to deny all the requested variances. I mean, there is some variability in there, but I do think as a package they're really necessary. So I will say that my motion is to deny all the variances based off of them failing on 4 of our 5 criteria, those 4 being 10.23, 3.21, granting the variance would not be in contrary to the public interest, 10.23, 3.22, granting the variance would observe the spirit of the ordinance, 10.23323, granting the variance would do substantial justice, and lastly, 10.233.25, what is commonly called the hardship criteria.
Okay. So the motion is to deny on public interest, spirit of the ordinance, substantial justice, and hardship. Is there a second for that?
Second.
Okay, and Mr. Rayum, your expanded motion, please.
Thank you. Yeah, and so I talked a little bit about, you know, some of my underlying thoughts about this. Going through the criteria, the first 2, as you know, as commonly brought up, are commonly considered together. And again, you know, mere conflict with the zoning ordinance is not enough, but I do think that there's nothing here that says that there's something that is especially compelling that meets our criteria that says in this particular instance, and you know, not even considering the other billboards, but in this particular instance, that this request by the applicant should be granted. And you know, I think the applicant in their arguments to us said, hey, you know, we're not changing the general characteristics of the neighborhood. I mean, I think the criteria is a little bit more broad than that, and that whether it would alter the essential character of the locality. And, you know, I think looking a little bit more broadly, again, as a locality, you know, yeah, maybe there's a couple businesses there, but I think a pretty good argument has been made that the locality has changed over the past 60 some odd years. Actually longer than that, isn't it, right? 70, 75, well, however many years it's been since, you know, this billboard was originally put up. That there have been changes in the nature, I think, as a community of what we expect out of signage in our community. And I do think that what they are proposing to do to intensify this grandfathered use would alter the essential character of the locality and really affects both of those. And then, you know, granted, the variance would observe the spirit of the ordinance. Again, there are multiple things here that need to be getting variances, and it's really because the ordinance is telling us, yep, we don't want signs that are advertising something that's not related to the property that they are on. We don't want signs that are in the transportation corridor. We're not going to include it in one of our sign districts. You know, we talk about sizing of signs, and it's certainly outside of the sphere of what we would allow in pretty much any district. So with that, I really think the spirit of the ordinance, those two aspects combined, really means that those two first criteria are failed. The next one, granting the variance, would do substantial justice. That is our balancing test here. And I think the applicant tried to make an argument, and there is some merit to their argument, that says, hey, there is some potential here. If you grant us what we're trying to do, there may be some public benefit towards having some of this additional, you know, wording out there that can be, you know, of a potential benefit to the community itself. I just think that those benefits that they're talking about, certainly the New Hampshire Department of Transportation has a lot of their own signage, which I kind of personally find a little distracting, but they have a lot of it out in different places. They're getting their message out. I don't think they necessarily need this particular location to add to that. I think as a community, we have lots of ways of getting our information out. I think as a society, we have a lot of ways of getting information out that are separate from what is needed for, you know, saying this billboard somehow would make a substantial enough improvement in that balancing test. I think the balancing test goes back to the public's provisions, which says that as a community, we say this type of use, sure, it's grandfathered, it's been there, don't intensify it, you can maintain it, but it is, you know, it stays what it is, what it's always been. We recognize your right to do that, but we as a community don't want to change that. And again, there's nothing special necessarily about this particular location, this particular application that would change that balance. And then lastly, the hardship criteria. I do think there are part of the hardship criteria might be satisfied in that because this is on the transportation corridor, because of its historically being there, I do think that there are some unique characteristics. I think it fails in the hardship on is the proposed use a reasonable one. Again, I just think it's outside of the scope of what the vision is for the transportation corridor. It's not part of what it is. That's the reason why our ordinance is written the way it is. And then the or was, you know, under these special conditions, the property cannot be reasonably used in strict conformance with the ordinance. And again, this is really a transportation corridor zone. Is really all about the railroad that's been there even longer than the sign. That's what we're focusing on here. It really is not, you know, we often say for a reasonable use, it's a you know, residential use in a residential zone. This is a not permitted use in a zone that's really about something very, very different. So that's why I believe it fails on the hardship criteria.
Okay. Anything for your second, Mr. Sullivan?
Yes.
Do you
First
accept
off-
the grounds for Mr. Ram?
Yes. I think the grounds are really very well stated by Mr. Riom, but as a general comment, although I believe the attorney firm Bernstein Schur, who presented this, did as good a job as could be done with the facts that he has, under our ordinance, you know, our specific ordinance, as you just heard in a lot of detail, what the presentation really amounted to was just putting lipstick on the pig. And although it may look nice in the lipstick, it is still swine, and this thing should be denied.
Okay. I don't know if Mr. Ray wants to accept that as a second.
A slightly different way of expressing what I expressed.
I would. Let's just leave it as
Yeah,
you
well-
accept. Okay. All right. So the motion is to deny the variances based on 4 of our criterion. Public interest and spirit, which are often talked of together, substantial justice, and hardship. Is there any discussion on the motion? Okay. With that, I will call the question. Mr. Sullivan?
Yes.
Mr. Rayom?
Yes.
Vice Chair Mattson?
No.
Mr. Nees?
Yes.
Mr. Lucas?
No.
And the chair votes yes. So the motion is denied. The denial motion is successful by a vote of 4 to 2. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for your patience. And with that, I'll ask for my favorite motion of the night.
Motion to adjourn?
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.